High above the clouds and deep within forgotten corners of the world lie places that seem untouched by time. Places so surreal, so breathtakingly strange, they challenge our very sense of what's real. These are the hidden wonders of Earth, remote mountains cloaked in mist, ancient ridges that glow with colors of another world, peaks that rise from jungles or shimmer with snow above tropical seas. In this journey, we'll explore the most unreal places on the planet, natural marvels that appear drawn from dream rather than soil and stone. Each mountain we visit tells a story not just of geology, but of culture, myth, and the quiet magic that lingers where the world still breathes wild. Prepare to leave the familiar behind and step into the extraordinary. But before we continue, subscribe to the channel and like the video. Far above the glistening waters of Lake Lucerne, a jagged silhouette commands the skyline. Mount Pilatus, a peak enshrined not only in stone and soil but in legend. Rising to 2,128 meters, 6,982 feet, Pilatus is more than just a mountain in Switzerland. It is a mythical stronghold woven into the fabric of Swiss folklore. From its rugged ridgelines to the whispering pines that skirt its base, Pilatus is steeped in the kind of wonder that makes it feel almost unreal. Locals once believed dragons lived among its crags, mighty, winged beasts that soared above the valleys and breathed fire over the forests. The legend of the Pilatus dragon dates back to the Middle Ages, and even as science replaced superstition, stories persisted. One tale tells of a farmer who encountered a dragon on the mountainside in 1421. Upon its sudden flight, the creature left behind a mysterious stone imbued with healing properties. Such stories gave the mountain a fearful reputation, so much so that it was forbidden for a time to climb it, lest the disturbance of spirits bring misfortune. Today, Pilatus is accessible via one of the steepest cogwheel railways in the world, an engineering marvel that ascends at a staggering 48% gradient from Alpnachstad to the summit. As the train clanks its way upwards, passengers are treated to vistas that expand with every meter gained. The sprawling waters of Lake Lucerne shimmer like molten glass below, while the rolling green hills of central Switzerland stretch into the horizon, capped by distant snow-draped peaks. At the summit, a panoramic terrace offers a 360-degree view that encompasses no fewer than 73 alpine peaks on a clear day. The air is thin, crisp, and clear, laced with the scent of alpine grass and fir. The silence here is profound, broken only by the occasional clink of cowbells far below or the rush of wind tumbling over the cliffs. Hikers can follow narrow trails that trace the jagged ridgeline, their paths interspersed with sheer drop-offs and sudden revelations of cascading valleys. Pilatus is also a haven for biodiversity. Golden eagles soar in thermal currents overhead while alpine ibex scale vertical slopes with ease. The flora shifts with elevation, from dense mixed forests of spruce and pine at lower altitudes to sparse, rocky outcrops where only moss and tiny alpine flowers cling stubbornly to life. In winter, the mountain transforms into a world of silence and snowdrifts, blanketed in white and bathed in ghostly moonlight. Snowshoeing and skiing replace hiking, but the sense of wonder remains unchanged. But perhaps what makes Pilatus truly unreal is how it blurs the line between myth and nature, history and geology. A simple glance at the craggy face of the mountain is enough to understand why people for centuries believed something ancient and powerful lived here. The wind sings through the rocks like a voice from another world, and even in modern times, it's difficult to stand at the summit without sensing something eternal, something almost sentient, lurking within the stone. Pilatus is more than a mountain. It is a story carved in earth, a legend etched into the very bones of Switzerland. Far across the Pacific, where the sky burns with tropical light and the ocean stretches endlessly toward the horizon, rises a mountain so vast that its true scale escapes the eye. Mauna Kea, a dormant volcano on the Big Island of Hawaii, appears almost modest at first glance, its summit standing at 13,803 feet, 4,207 meters, above sea level. But the truth lies hidden beneath the waves. When measured from its underwater base on the ocean floor, Mauna Kea soars over 33,500 feet, 10,210 meters, tall, making it the tallest mountain on Earth by sheer vertical measurement, far surpassing Everest's height from base to peak. It's a colossus born from fire and saltwater, an island forged through millions of years of volcanic eruptions that rose steadily from the abyssal depths of the Pacific Ocean. This place, revered by native Hawaiians as sacred, is more than a geological marvel. It is a living temple, a space where Earth touches the sky, and the sky in turn reaches into the heavens. Its name, Mauna Kea, means White Mountain, a title earned from the snow that often crowns its summit even as palm trees sway far below in warm ocean breezes. Snow, in Hawaii, there is something so surreal in that alone. Imagine standing at the summit, your breath frosting in the thin, high-altitude air, while just miles away, surfers carve waves beneath golden light. Up here, it's another world entirely. The summit is stark, windswept, and often eerily quiet. The air is dry, and the volcanic soil is barren and red, resembling the surface of Mars more than any tropical paradise. This alien landscape, far above the sea, has drawn comparisons to other planets and is even used by NASA to test lunar and Martian rovers. But the mountain's connection to the cosmos goes even deeper. Its summit is home to some of the most advanced astronomical observatories in the world. The atmosphere above Mauna Kea is unusually stable and dry, and the lack of light pollution offers some of the clearest night skies on the planet. Telescopes here peer into the farthest reaches of the universe, gathering light that has traveled billions of years. It's a place where human understanding stretches as far as the stars themselves, and yet it remains tethered to ancient tradition. To the native Hawaiian people, Mauna Kea is not simply a vantage point for science. It is a spiritual axis, the dwelling place of divine ancestors and the foundation of cosmological identity. Rituals and chants, preserved across generations, describe the mountain as the umbilical cord connecting earth and sky. Burial sites of Hawaiian chiefs lie hidden among its slopes, and each snowfall, each storm, is read with reverence. Climbing the summit is not a simple hike, it is a pilgrimage, a journey into the realm of the gods. This dual identity, sacred and scientific, makes Mauna Kea one of the most unreal and contested places on Earth. Its summit is both an altar and an observatory, a place where ancient wisdom and modern knowledge sit side by side, often in tension. In recent years, it has become a focal point for cultural resistance, with protests rising around the construction of new telescopes, seen by many as desecration. The struggle embodies a wider story, the challenge of reconciling indigenous beliefs with scientific ambition, of honoring land not only for what it offers in data but for what it means to the soul. Yet, no matter where one stands in that debate, the mountain's power is undeniable. There is an unmistakable stillness on its summit, a hush that seems to pause time itself. The horizon curves subtly, revealing the Earth's roundness. The stars above sparkle with impossible clarity, and during certain times of year, the Milky Way spills across the sky like liquid silver. From this height, the lights of the towns below feel as distant as reflections in water, and the clouds that drift beneath you look like frozen waves rolling across the sea. To stand on Mauna Kea is to feel the world from a new vantage point, not just physically, but philosophically. It reminds us of our smallness and our reach, our capacity for awe and our hunger for meaning. It is a mountain that rises not only from the sea, but into the very core of human wonder. Snow-capped and skybound, silent yet speaking in symbols older than speech, Mauna Kea is the breath between two worlds. Far away from the glass towers of modern cities and the vast networks of paved roads and steel, there exists a world where the earth breathes with ancient rhythm, where the forests hum with the lives of countless species, and where towering green giants cast long shadows over villages that speak in chants older than recorded time. In the heart of Papua New Guinea's western highlands, such a place rises in mist and mystery. Mount Hagen, a commanding peak cloaked in dense jungle, tribal heritage, and unspoken secrets. At 3,765 meters, 12,352 feet, Mount Hagen stands as one of Papua New Guinea's most prominent volcanic peaks, a relic of geologic fire now softened by lush vegetation and cloaked in veils of rolling mist. Unlike more famous mountains in polished touristic destinations, Mount Hagen does not wear a mask of accessibility. This is not a mountain of hotels, highways, or steady internet. This is a land of dirt paths, whispering trees, distant drumbeats, and the ever-present scent of wet earth. Here, nature and culture are as intertwined as the vines that creep across the jungle canopy. Mount Hagen is named after Kurt von Hagen, a German colonial officer, but to the tribes who live in its shadow, it carries deeper, more intimate meanings. The mountain is both protector and ancestor, a constant and quiet witness to the passage of time. Surrounding its base are fertile valleys teeming with life, banana plantations, coffee farms, and traditional villages comprised of thatched roof huts, each decorated with elaborate tribal art and guarded by generations of memory. The forests that climb its slopes are some of the most biologically rich and least disturbed in the world. As you ascend through this green cathedral, you pass through distinct ecological layers. Lowland rainforest gives way to montane cloud forest, and eventually to the mossy, elfin woodlands near the summit. The air grows cooler, damper. The light dims as ancient trees, their branches sheathed in epiphytic orchids and lichens, block out the sun. Every corner seems alive with a chirp, a buzz, a whisper of wings. Tree kangaroos rustle through the branches, while birds of paradise, those miraculous, feathered displays of evolution, dart in iridescent flashes between leaves. And yet, the true spirit of Mount Hagen lies not just in its ecology but in the culture it has helped shape. The region is home to some of Papua New Guinea's most vibrant and complex tribal communities, many of whom trace their ancestral lineages directly to the slopes of the mountain. Here, tribal identity isn't just a label, it is a deep, living truth, expressed through language, ritual, and a visual vocabulary of feathers, face paint, bone, and bark. One of the most striking manifestations of this cultural legacy is the annual Mount Hagen Cultural Show, a spectacle of color and choreography that draws together over 100 different tribes from across the region. Though it takes place in the nearby town, the spirit of the mountain is present in every beat of the kundu drum, in every piercing gaze beneath a painted brow. Tribesmen and women adorned in towering headdresses of bird feathers and boar tusks move with practiced, symbolic motions, rituals passed from elder to youth for generations. It is not a performance for tourists, though some attend. It is a reaffirmation of identity, a declaration of survival in a rapidly changing world. The world around Mount Hagen may seem untouched by time, but this land is not immune to modern pressure. Roads and airstrips now thread their way through parts of the valley. Missionary work, political reform, logging interests, and the encroaching influence of globalized media have all begun to stir the once still waters of traditional life. And yet, much remains as it has for centuries. There are places here where language barriers are not just about dialects, but about entirely separate linguistic trees. Papua New Guinea is home to over 800 languages, and many of them thrive in the villages nestled at the feet of this mountain. Travelers who make their way to Mount Hagen often speak of the sense of stepping out of time. The journey itself is not easy. Flights into the highlands are weather-dependent, and from the small airport, the road is slow, often muddy, winding through valleys that feel like closed pages in an unopened book. But for those who endure the voyage, what awaits is not just scenery. It is immersion into a world where stories are sung, where clans remember their pasts in ochre and charcoal, and where the mountain looms like a stern elder who does not need to speak to be understood. Climbing Mount Hagen is possible, though few undertake the task. Trails are not clearly marked, and the jungle is thick with mystery. Leeches cling to the moist undergrowth, and visibility can vanish in a breath as the clouds descend without warning. But for those who persist, the reward is profound. From the summit, the view opens up to an endless canopy. Rolling green hills fold into one another like an emerald ocean, and if the sky is clear, the sun breaks through in golden columns, illuminating patches of forest like sacred altars. The silence at the top is complete, but it's the kind of silence that listens back. Few places on Earth hold so much within such a relatively small geographical area. Diversity of language, ritual, belief, and ecology all swirl together in this tight circle of life. Every path on the mountain might be a songline. Every bend in the river may carry a spirit's name. In a modern world that often moves too fast to remember its roots, Mount Hagen stands as a living monument to the power of tradition, the richness of human culture, and the raw, unfiltered majesty of the natural world. And as dusk falls on the slopes, the clouds close in, and the torches are lit in distant huts below. Somewhere in the darkness, a flute begins to play. Not for tourists, not for cameras, but for the mountain itself, a melody offered up to the ancient guardian who has watched over all of this for longer than memory. Mount Hagen remains, quiet, sacred, untamed. Far to the south of the Pacific's restless heart, where the sea wind carries the sharp scent of salt and moss, and where clouds seem to wander deliberately across the sky like thoughtful spirits, rises one of the most geometrically perfect mountains on Earth, Mount Taranaki. Also known as Mount Egmont, this stratovolcano in New Zealand's North Island is so flawlessly symmetrical, so strikingly distinct against the surrounding flatlands, that it seems almost too precise to be natural. Often compared to Japan's Mount Fuji, Taranaki rises like a dream, a lonely sentinel piercing the sky from a lush emerald plain, its snow-capped summit shining like a sacred beacon. Mount Taranaki's perfection isn't a trick of the eye. It is the result of millennia of slow, relentless geological sculpting. Standing at 2,518 meters, 8,261 feet, the mountain formed some 120,000 years ago, making it relatively young in volcanic terms. Its conical form is the product of repeated symmetrical eruptions, lava flows, and ash deposits, building up layer by precise layer. Unlike many volcanoes that develop jagged peaks or fractured summits from violent eruptions, Taranaki has remained quiet in modern times, allowing its shape to remain almost mathematically pristine. Its last eruption was in the mid-18th century, but it is classified as dormant, not extinct, meaning it could one day awaken again. From a distance, the mountain appears to rise alone, a solitary monolith amid a carpet of green. The surrounding Taranaki region is remarkably flat, and the mountain's solitary presence adds to its surreal impact. It commands the landscape with such authority that it has become the focal point of the entire region, shaping both weather and cultural identity. From space, the boundary of Egmont National Park appears as a near-perfect circle, an unbroken ring of forest carved out around the peak like a dark green halo. This circular border is not just cartographic curiosity. It reflects a century of environmental preservation, protecting the ancient forests that radiate outward like the folds of a great living cloak. These forests are among the most untouched in New Zealand, home to towering rimu, kamahi, and kahikatea trees, their trunks wrapped in moss and their canopies echoing with the calls of native birds. As you approach the base of the mountain, the air grows thick with moisture, rich with the scent of damp bark and the quiet hum of unseen insects. The trails here wind through goblin-like woodlands draped in epiphytes, where silver ferns shimmer in the dim understory and waterfalls spill from rocky overhangs into secret pools of turquoise. Climbing Mount Taranaki is both a physical and psychological journey. It is not a difficult mountain technically, but it demands respect. Its weather can change with a suddenness that feels almost supernatural. Clouds roll in from the Tasman Sea in minutes, and what begins as a warm, clear ascent can become a cold, misty challenge in the blink of an eye. Despite its moderate altitude, the mountain's isolation and exposure make it deceptively dangerous. Ice, fog, and sudden storms have claimed lives, and local legends speak of the mountain's power to test those who dare approach its sacred peak. Those legends run deep. To the Maori, Taranaki is not simply a mountain, it is an ancestor, a being with thoughts, emotions, and a history of its own. According to Maori mythology, Taranaki once lived among the other great volcanoes of New Zealand's Central Plateau, Tongariro, Ngauruhoe, and Ruapepu. But after a tragic love triangle with the beautiful mountain Pahanga, Taranaki was defeated in battle and banished to the west. In his sorrow, he carved a deep scar into the land, the Wanganui River, as he fled to his current resting place on the coast. There he remains, distant and watching, longing for the lover he lost. It is said that when the mountain is shrouded in cloud, he is weeping. When the skies are clear, he is remembering her. This myth is not merely story but living heritage. Maori tribes in the region maintain a deep spiritual relationship with the mountain. Its slopes and surrounding lands are sacred, and access to certain parts is restricted out of respect for the mountain's mana, or spiritual authority. In 2017, the New Zealand government took the extraordinary step of granting Mount Taranaki the legal rights of a person, a symbolic recognition of its importance as a living entity, and a groundbreaking fusion of indigenous belief with legal framework. This decision was part of a broader movement in New Zealand to legally personify natural landmarks, acknowledging that some places are more than landforms. They are ancestors, teachers, guardians. Standing on the summit of Taranaki on a clear day, the view stretches in all directions. Green farmland rolls endlessly to the sea, and on the horizon, the faint glimmer of other ranges can be seen like ghosts on the edge of vision. The crater at the top, often filled with snow and ice, is a quiet amphitheater of stone and sky. It's the kind of place where time doesn't pass in seconds but in heartbeats, in breaths of thin, cold air, in the rustle of clouds slipping past like forgotten thoughts. Descending the mountain, the symmetry that defined your ascent begins to feel more like perfection designed by something greater than chance. The curves of the slopes, the gentle radial folds of forest, the symmetry of light and shadow. It all combines to create a place that feels less like a product of nature and more like a gift from it. Few mountains in the world embody such visual clarity, cultural gravity, and ecological richness all at once. Mount Taranaki is more than a landscape. It is a symbol, a guardian, a wounded god, and a living mirror. It reflects the purity of form, the depth of heritage, and the paradox of stillness and change. To see it rise from the misty green of New Zealand's west coast is to witness the impossible made real, to see what it means for land to speak, silently, powerfully, endlessly. In the heart of the Julian Alps, where the peaks glisten under blankets of snow and the valleys bloom with wildflowers in a palette too perfect to imitate, rises a mountain that is far more than stone in elevation. It is a symbol, a soul, a unifying force for an entire nation. Mount Triglav, standing at 2,864 meters, 9,396 feet, is not just Slovenia's highest peak. It is its heart, its guardian, and its myth. So central is Triglav to Slovenian identity that it is emblazoned on the national flag and coat of arms, its silhouette rising in crisp, white lines over the colors of the Republic. But beyond the heraldry lies something deeper, an emotional, spiritual connection between people and peak that defies simple description. Triglav means three-headed, and from certain angles, its summit does indeed appear as a trio of craggy crowns, standing like sentinels over the wild northern frontier of Slovenia. But the name also ties back to Slavic mythology, where Triglav was a three-faced deity, watching over the heavens, the earth, and the underworld all at once. This ancient symbolism, both literal and mythic, saturates the mountain with an aura of timelessness. To climb Triglav is not just a hike, it is, for many Slovenians, a rite of passage. There's a well-known saying in the country, "You're not a true Slovenian until you've stood on Triglav's summit." The mountain resides in Triglav National Park, the only national park in Slovenia and one of the oldest in Europe. This protected expanse of alpine wilderness is a land of extremes. Icy crags meet velvet meadows, glacial valleys cradle turquoise lakes, and ancient pine forests shelter deer, chamois, and the elusive lynx. Streams of crystal-clear water tumble over moss-covered rocks, and the air smells of stone, pine resin, and the faint mineral tang of fresh snow. The park is not just a preserve of nature but a living museum of harmony between land and culture. Tiny wooden huts cling to green slopes, and shepherds still bring their flocks to graze on the same pastures their ancestors once walked. One of the most enchanting features of the region surrounding Mount Triglav is its alpine lakes, especially the famed Seven Lakes Valley, Dolina Sedmari Jezera, a necklace of shimmering pools strung out like precious gems beneath the surrounding ridges. Each lake is slightly different in color, size, and mood, some dark and brooding, others light and glassy, reflecting the sky so perfectly that you feel you might fall upward into it. These lakes are glacial in origin, formed during the last ice age, and they remain cold, clear, and largely untouched. Hikers moving through this valley pass through meadows carpeted in wildflowers in spring and framed by fiery larches in autumn. It is a land that changes with the seasons but always keeps its quiet, contemplative beauty. Climbing Triglav is a journey of both challenge and wonder. There are several routes to the top, each offering a different perspective of the mountain's grandeur. The most popular and traditional route begins at the base lodge at Pokluka or from the alpine town of Bohinj, winding through steep forests, across open scree fields, and eventually onto the exposed ridgelines that lead to the summit. The final ascent is a dramatic climb along a narrow path of iron spikes and cables bolted into the rock, known as a via ferrata. This section, while safe and well-traveled, demands a calm mind and sure footing. One side drops into nothingness, and the wind here speaks in sudden gusts. At the summit stands a small, cylindrical metal structure, the Alger Tower. Built in 1895 by priest Jacob Alger, it is part shelter, part monument, and part spiritual anchor. Standing beside it, wind tugging at your clothes and clouds skimming just below your boots, the world seems at once immense and intimate. To the west lie the snowy ridges of Italy. To the north, the distant peaks of Austria. And all around, Slovenia unfolds in green waves and stone ribs, a land of quiet valleys and hidden meadows. Here, where earth meets sky, one does not feel like a conqueror of the mountain, but a welcomed guest. The cultural weight of Triglav is difficult to overstate. During times of occupation and political upheaval, it remained a symbol of Slovenian resilience. In World War II, partisans hid in the folds of the Julian Alps, waging guerrilla warfare against fascist forces. The mountain was more than a hiding place, it was a symbol of defiance, standing watch as the people beneath it fought for their identity. Even today, climbers young and old make the pilgrimage not just for sport, but to feel that ancestral connection. School children read poems about Triglav. Artists painted. Families picnic on its slopes, and lovers take photographs by the lakes that shimmer at its feet. Nature itself is a quiet yet ever-present character here. The ibex wanders the higher rocks, unfazed by the steep slopes. The golden eagle wheels silently overhead, its sharp eyes searching the ridgelines for movement. Marmots chirp warnings from the underbrush, and, in spring, the mountainsides explode in a confetti of alpine blossoms, edelweiss, gentian, and mountain avens. The sound of cowbells from distant herders echoes faintly across the ridges, blending with the rush of alpine streams and the rustling of wind across heather and grass. What makes Triglav feel unreal is not just its beauty, but the seamless way it weaves together myth, identity, and landscape. It is a place where every rock carries memory, where every turn of the path feels like the edge of a fairy tale. To walk here is to touch something eternal, something unchanged in essence even as the world evolves. The air is clean, not just in the literal sense, but in its emotional weightlessness. Up here, among the circling ravens and frost-touched cliffs, one feels not detached from life below, but more deeply rooted in its meaning. And so Triglav remains, silent, stoic, and full of stories. A mountain not just climbed but lived. Not just admired but carried in the soul. A three-headed sentinel watching over a nation that, in its gaze, sees its own past, present, and future reflected in snow and sky. In the high, ancient heart of Ethiopia, where the air grows thin and the land speaks in whispers of both sky and stone, rises a mountain that holds centuries of memory in its ridges and slopes, Mount Gunner. Towering at approximately 4,120 meters, 13,517 feet, Gunner is one of the loftiest peaks in the Ethiopian highlands and a sacred sentinel to the Amhara people. Here, amid a rugged world shaped by tectonic uplift and volcanic fire, the mountain stands not as a distant, cold monolith but as a living guardian, watched, respected, and quietly revered. To understand the significance of Mount Gunner, one must begin with the land around it, a vast plateau split by deep gorges and sweeping escarpments, often referred to as the roof of Africa. The Ethiopian highlands are a region of dramatic contrasts. Wide, fertile valleys are cradled between formidable rock walls, and winding footpaths cut across slopes that disappear into the mist. The terrain is both breathtaking and humbling, carved by geological time and steeped in a human history that stretches back thousands of years. And in the midst of this complex geography, Gunner asserts itself with an unassuming majesty, its broad shoulders etched in stone and its summit often crowned in cloud. This mountain is not isolated in meaning, it is part of a wider spiritual landscape. In Ethiopian Orthodox Christianity, which has been practiced in the region for well over 1,500 years, mountains have long been viewed as places of divine encounter, where monks go to seek closeness with God, and where churches and monasteries perch impossibly high among cliffs, hidden like precious relics. Gunner shares this reverence. Local legends speak of saints and hermits who climbed its slopes in search of silence, and its peaks are seen as dwelling places of the holy. Unlike some other celebrated peaks that are surrounded by tourism infrastructure, Mount Gunner remains largely untouched by mass development. It is a working mountain, lived on, farmed, and respected. Its lower slopes are patchworked with small plots of barley, wheat, and teff, Ethiopia's ancient grain. Farmers till the land with ox-drawn plows, just as their ancestors did, and stone huts with thatched roofs to the landscape like scattered memories. The pace of life here is slow, guided by the rhythm of rain and sun, tradition and harvest. The ecology of Mount Gunner is equally remarkable. As one ascends, the changing elevation reveals distinct bands of vegetation and climate. The lower hills are green and cultivated, rich with birdlife and insects, while the mid-altitudes offer pockets of Afromontane forest, where gnarled trees are draped in moss, and the call of the Abyssinian catbird echoes through the canopy. Higher still, the air grows crisp and the vegetation sparse, giving way to hardy alpine grasses and low shrubs adapted to the mountain's exposure. But perhaps what gives Mount Gunner its most sacred character is water. The mountain is a hydrological powerhouse, one of the key sources for many of the rivers that feed the Blue Nile Basin. Springs and streams gush from its slopes year-round, giving life to the valleys below. The Rib, Gumara, and other rivers originate here, their waters trickling down to fuel agriculture, quench the thirst of animals and people, and eventually join larger tributaries that snake their way across the highlands into the arteries of the Nile. In a land where water is both life and struggle, Gunner is seen as a giver, a mountain of providence. Walking on Gunner's flanks, One is surrounded by a sensory richness that makes the surreal feel natural. The mountain seems to pulse with vitality, from the rhythmic thud of footsteps on ancient trails to the distant hum of bees among wild thyme. Pastoralists guide herds of goats and cattle along narrow ridges, their figures silhouetted against vast open skies. Children chase after flocks of sheep, laughter echoing down gullies, and old men sit in the shadow of rock outcrops, their walking sticks carved smooth by decades of use. Above them all, the peak looms, not aggressively but with quiet dignity. It does not pierce the sky like jagged spires, it rises more like a great shoulder of the earth, broad and encompassing. Its rounded summit blends into the horizon on cloudy days, and on clear ones, it offers a view so vast it bends belief. From the top, one can see the sprawl of the Amhara countryside, where terraced hills roll out in every direction, interrupted only by sudden cliffs or the winding glitter of distant rivers. The light here is sharp and crystalline, unfiltered by pollution or distortion, giving the landscape a dreamlike sharpness. In the early morning or late afternoon, the sun casts long golden shadows that stretch over the land like a painter's brushstroke, highlighting every crease and curve of the terrain. Mount Gunner is also a mountain of memory. Oral histories passed from generation to generation preserve stories of resistance, survival, and faith. During times of conflict, such as the Italian occupation or the later civil wars, the mountain offered refuge. Its caves and forests a hiding place for fighters, its paths known only to locals. In this way, Gunner has seen fear and hope, silence and gunfire, solitude and community. It has borne witness without judgment. Modernity has begun to touch even here, of course. Concrete buildings now dot some of the nearby villages, and mobile towers peek over the hills. Education has improved, and some youth from these highland communities have gone on to study in cities like Bahir Dar or Addis Ababa. Yet, when they return, they still look to Gunner as home. They still greet it with reverence. The mountain does not just stand above them, it is within them. It is their compass, their origin, their altar. There is something deeply humbling about such places, where elevation is not just measured in meters, but in meaning. Mount Gunner does not demand attention with the sharp drama of peaks like the Matterhorn or Denali. Instead, it moves slowly into the consciousness, like a poem remembered from childhood or a prayer whispered through time. Its presence is constant and quiet, yet overwhelmingly profound. It watches over life below not with arrogance but with understanding. To visit Mount Gunner is not to cross off a destination or snap a photo. It is to enter a relationship, to stand in a place where the divine and the earthly intermingle. The mountain slopes are marked by footprints from both the living and the long departed. Its waters carry blessings. Its forests hold secrets. And in its broad summit, softened by time and crowned in sky, there exists a truth that belongs not only to Ethiopia, but to all who seek places that still hold the pulse of the sacred. Far in the windswept reaches of western Newfoundland, where the Atlantic pounds jagged cliffs and seabirds cry out over vast, unspoiled bays, there lies a land so unlike the rest of Canada that it seems transplanted from another world, or perhaps another time entirely. The Tablelands, nestled within Gros Morne National Park, rise not with the jagged thrust of youthful mountains but with the solemn authority of the Earth's deep past. Their summits are broad, flat, and bronze, great weathered plateaus composed of orange-hued rock that gleams strangely in the northern sun. This place does not feel terrestrial in the ordinary sense. It feels primordial, as if the planet itself had peeled back its skin to reveal something ancient, untouched, and quietly waiting. These flat-topped mountains are not just unique in form, they are geologically singular. The Tablelands are one of the only places on Earth where a piece of the Earth's mantle, the dense, mineral-rich layer beneath the crust, has been thrust to the surface and laid bare. The rock that forms these ochre hills is peridotite, a dense ultramafic rock formed deep in the Earth's interior. Through the process of continental collision some 500 million years ago, during the closure of the ancient Iapetus Ocean, tectonic forces pushed this mantle material upward, placing it on top of the more typical crustal rocks of the region. In other words, the Tablelands are a fragment of the Earth's inner skeleton, exposed for all to see. This act of geological revelation lends the Tablelands an otherworldly appearance. The rust-colored slopes are largely devoid of vegetation, despite the ample rainfall of the region. That's because peridotite contains high concentrations of heavy metals like nickel and chromium, which are toxic to most plant life. The soil here is thin, infertile, and inhospitable. Mosses and lichens cling where they can, and only the hardiest of alpine flowers push through in sheltered spots. As a result, the landscape is stark, stripped, and raw, evoking the surface of Mars or some long-lost primordial land where life has not yet taken hold. Walking through the Tablelands is like wandering through deep time. The air is sharp and clean, often filled with the rush of wind or the call of a raven slicing across the sky. Trails cut across open slopes of crumbling rock, the surface underfoot a mix of red dust, golden gravel, and smooth, glacially scoured stone. In the distance, steep ridges loom, layered with ancient sediment and capped in snow. There are no trees to obscure the view, just open space, open silence, and the steady unfolding of geologic truth. The Tablelands are part of Gross Mourne National Park, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and their presence is central to why the park received this distinction. Nowhere else in the world is the process of plate tectonics, the slow, grinding dance of the Earth's crust, more visible, more comprehensible to the naked eye. The rocks tell a story not just of Newfoundland, but of the entire planet, how oceans are born and die, how continents drift like slow ships over deep currents, how the Earth folds and fractures and remakes itself again and again. In a sense, walking through the Tablelands is to read the Earth's autobiography, written not in words but in stone. Yet for all their geological austerity, the Tablelands are not lifeless. In the sheltered crevices where water collects, hardy plants like Arctic alpine saxifrage bloom in summer, their tiny blossoms bright against the copper rock. Insects buzz, small birds flit among the rock piles, and the occasional snowshoe hare leaves tracks in the dust. Overhead, the shadow of a bald eagle may glide silently, or the thin call of a red-throated loon may echo across a nearby fjord. Surrounding the Tablelands, the rest of Gross Mourne is a world of contrast. Deep fjords carved by glacier, thick boreal forests of spruce and fir, and sparkling lakes nestled among towering cliffs. Just a short distance from the barren orange slopes lies Western Brook Pond, a stunning landlocked fjord where cliffs rise 1,000 feet sheer from icy waters. This juxtaposition of lifeless mantle rock and lush, vibrant forest is part of what makes the Tablelands so surreal. They do not belong, and yet they are deeply, foundationally a part of this land. For the indigenous peoples of the region, the Mi'kmaq, this area was long a place of travel, hunting, and spiritual reflection. While the Tablelands themselves may not have supported permanent settlement due to their barrenness, their uniqueness would not have gone unnoticed. To move from the forests and rivers into this exposed, golden land would have felt like crossing a threshold, like stepping into a different world entirely. And indeed, even today, the transition is dramatic. One moment you walk through thick greenery, and the next, you are in a dry, rust-colored valley, empty and open, surrounded by silence. In modern times, the Tablelands have become a pilgrimage site of sorts, not religious, but scientific and philosophical. Geologists from around the world come here to study the rock, to hold pieces of the Earth's mantle in their hands and trace the vast narrative of tectonic motion. Tourists come not only for the scenery but for the experience, the chance to feel what it is to walk on something older than fossils, older than forests, older even than the mountains themselves. There is something profoundly humbling about this place. It is not beautiful in a conventional sense. There are no lush meadows or grand alpine peaks. Instead, it offers the beauty of austerity, of knowledge, of scale. The Tablelands remind us that we are passengers on a dynamic, living planet, one whose deep forces shape everything we see and know. They show us that what is buried can one day rise, that even the Earth's most hidden places can, in time, come into the light. And as the wind howls across the orange ridges and the last light of day catches the stone in copper flame, it is hard not to feel that you are standing in the presence of something eternal. The Tablelands do not shout. They do not glitter or dazzle, but they endure, and in that quiet endurance, they become something truly unreal. A dream of Earth as it once was, a vision of what lies beneath our feet, a reminder of just how deep the story goes. Deep within the brooding wilderness of the Caucasus Mountains, where the wind whispers over jagged ridges and snow-fed rivers rush through shadowed valleys, there rises a peak so remote and formidable that even many seasoned mountaineers know its name only in reverent murmurs. Dwykh Tau, meaning jagged mount in the local Borka language, looms at 5,205 meters, 17,077 feet, making it the second highest mountain in Europe after the more famous Mount Elbrus. Yet unlike its sibling to the northwest, DYKH Tau remains largely unknown to the world beyond mountaineering circles. It hides in plain sight, concealed not just by clouds but by complexity, of terrain, of access, and of myth. This majestic pyramid of ice and granite lies in Russia's Kabardino-Balkaria region, near the border with Georgia, tucked away in a part of the Caucasus so rugged, so labyrinthine, that it seems purpose-built to guard its own mysteries. The approach alone is a trial of will and endurance. Roads narrow to gravel tracks, then to goat paths. Villages give way to wilderness, and communication falls away as mobile signals vanish into the folds of the land. The air grows thinner, colder. Only the towering white tooth of DH Tau grows larger, looming ever higher behind veils of mist and scree. Unlike Elbrus, whose twin domes offer relatively accessible routes for well-equipped tourists, DYKH Tau is an alpinist's mountain. Its steep faces, knife-edge ridges, and ever-present threat of avalanche demand technical precision and unshakable nerves. Most ascents begin in the Bazingi Valley, a high-altitude corridor known for housing several of the Caucasus' most dramatic peaks. From here, climbers must traverse glacier, scale near-vertical ice walls, and navigate treacherous crevasses and cornices. The final ridge to the summit is an exposed spine of snow and rock that tests every step with wind and gravity. This is not a place for casual admiration. It must be earned, one heartbeat at a time. But for those who venture into its realm, DYKH Tau offers an experience that borders on the transcendent. The mountain possesses an intensity that is difficult to capture in mere photographs or technical descriptions. It is not just tall, it is sharp, angular, violent in silhouette. Sunlight cuts across its ridges like a blade. Storm clouds gather around its peak as if in deference. Glacier cling to its flanks like ancient scars, slowly flowing downward in frozen silence. Every angle reveals a new drama, vast, sheer faces draped in seracs, hanging ice that groans with the weight of ages, and shadowed couloirs that conceal the secrets of long winters. The environment surrounding DYKH Tau is just as surreal. The lower slopes are threaded with alpine meadows that bloom briefly in summer with wildflowers, pale purple crocus, yellow poppies, deep red campion. Streams fed by glacial meltwater sparkle in the sun, carving trails through mossy boulders and over cliff edges into misty chasms. Shepherds still move their flocks through these highlands, their woolen coats and carved staffs unchanged for centuries. Their villages, like the mountain itself, seem half forgotten by time. Clusters of stone houses, smoky hearths, and watchful dogs that peer from rooftops as strangers pass. This region is not just one of physical remoteness, but also of deep cultural isolation. The indigenous Borca and Karachi people, Turkic-speaking mountain folk, have their own customs, languages, and stories, many of which center on the mountains themselves. To them, the peaks are more than geological phenomena. They are ancestral presences, places where spirits reside and from which the natural balance flows. The mountains are not conquered, they are approached with humility and prayer. It is not hard to understand why. DYKH Tau's mere presence commands reverence. From the right vantage point at dawn, it appears to glow, its ice-carved ridges bathed in pink and gold, its summit slicing upward like the prow of some mythic vessel breaking through the firmament. The silence here is total, interrupted only by the groan of shifting ice or the distant rumble of a rockfall. Time seems to hold its breath around this peak. The boundaries between earth and sky, between body and soul, begin to dissolve. In winter, the mountain becomes even more otherworldly. Snowfall erases all paths. Winds sculpt the landscape into surreal shapes, drifts that seem to defy gravity. Temperatures plunge, and the very air begins to burn in the lungs. Yet even in this stark season, DYKH Tau radiates a solemn, brutal beauty. It is not cruel, but it is indifferent. It does not welcome. It does not punish. It simply is, vast, indifferent, and utterly uncompromising in its perfection. Few attempt its summit each year. Those who do often come from abroad, elite climbers from France, Germany, or the former Soviet republics, drawn to the technical challenge and the mountain's remote purity. Guides are essential, often drawn from the local communities who know the terrain with the intimacy of old kin. Their knowledge of snowpack, of sudden weather changes, of which ridge holds hidden ice, can mean the difference between success and tragedy. And yet, for all the danger and difficulty, the reward is unmatched. From the summit of Dykh Tau, the Caucasus reveals its full glory. Peaks stretch in all directions, a jagged, frozen sea that seems to go on forever. Valleys plunge into darkness, while the higher ridges catch the morning sun and burn with cold fire. In that moment, above language, above doubt, above the ordinary, you are no longer separate from the mountain. You are part of its breath, its silence, its truth. Dykh Tau is not a tourist attraction. It does not appear on postcards or travel brochures. It is rarely spoken of outside certain circles. And yet, it is one of the most unreal places on Earth, not because it dazzles with ease, but because it demands something from you. It demands humility, commitment, respect. And for those who answer that call, who brave the elements and the unknown, it offers a glimpse of something rare, a world where nature still rules absolutely, and where the human spirit can rediscover its smallness and its strength in the face of towering, eternal stone. In the southern wilds of New Zealand's South Island, where braided rivers weave through glacial valleys and forests grow ancient and undisturbed, a single peak rises with a sculptural grace so arresting it seems almost surreal. Mount Aspiring, or Tititia in the Maori language. Soaring to 3,033 meters, 9,951 feet, it is the highest mountain outside the Iraqi Mount Cook region and stands like a sentinel over one of the most dramatic wilderness areas in the southern hemisphere. Often called the Matterhorn of the South for its steep, symmetrical summit pyramid, Aspiring is more than a beautiful mountain. It is a testament to the raw and delicate power of nature in its purest form. Located within the boundaries of Mount Aspiring National Park, a UNESCO World Heritage Site that forms part of the Te Waipunamu area, the mountain is a focal point of one of the most untouched, diverse, and sublime ecosystems in New Zealand. To approach it is to pass through a geographic symphony. Lush beech forests echo with birdsong, deep U-shaped valleys carved by glacier stretch into the horizon, and waterfalls drop hundreds of feet in crystalline torrents, their mist catching the light like scattered diamonds. The journey to even glimpse Aspiring from its base is no casual venture. It requires dedication, stamina, and a deep willingness to enter into the wild. One of the most popular routes to the base of the mountain begins in the Matukituki Valley, a place of such tranquil grandeur that even silence seems to have its own sound. The trail winds for hours through Primeval Forest, across swing bridges spanning icy glacial rivers, and into vast open valleys where the mountain first reveals itself, an ethereal spike of white against the endless blue sky. Its faces are steep, its ridges sharp, its glacier draped like frozen cloaks over its flanks. Even from a distance, Mount Aspiring commands attention with an almost magnetic pull. It is not just high, it is elegant, poised, and alive with motion frozen in stone. The Maori name, Tititia, translates as glistening peak, and it's easy to see why. At sunrise, its summit glows with pinks and oranges, and by midday, it gleams like polished silver under the southern sun. Snow clings to its upper reaches year-round, feeding the massive Bona Glacier that flows from its southern face. This glacier, with its yawning crevasses and gleaming seracs, is both a wonder and a challenge, an ever-changing landscape of ice that groans and cracks as it slowly slides down the mountain's flank. Mount Aspiring is a dream for alpinists, but it does not yield itself easily. Reaching the summit involves glacier travel, technical climbing, and a deep respect for rapidly changing alpine conditions. Weather systems can sweep in from the Tasman Sea with alarming speed, blanketing the mountain in fog, snow, or blinding sun within hours. The Bona Glacier route, the most common approach, requires mountaineers to navigate crevasses, scale icy walls, and cross snowfields that can shift unpredictably. Even seasoned climbers are humbled by its complexity. Despite its challenges, Aspiring has long inspired a sense of pilgrimage. Since the early 1900s, climbers have been drawn to its perfect form and the mythic pull of its isolation. The first successful ascent was made in 1909 by Major Bernard Head and his guides, and since then, it has remained one of New Zealand's most prized alpine objectives. Yet, for many, it is not the summit that defines the experience, but the journey itself, the immersion in a wilderness where human presence feels fleeting and insignificant against the grandeur of the land. Mount Aspiring National Park, which surrounds the mountain, is a mosaic of ecosystems. Its lower valleys are filled with ancient red beech and silver beech trees, their trunks wrapped in moss and their branches home to tui and bellbirds. Higher up, the forest gives way to alpine tussocks, wildflowers, and herb fields that bloom in bursts of color during the brief summer. Above the tree line, the environment becomes starker. Scree slopes and rock fields stretch beneath snowfields and hanging glacier, where kea, New Zealand's alpine parrot, squawk and play in the thin air. The cultural weight of this landscape is equally profound. For Maori, the Southern Alps are a sacred backbone of the land, Titiritangana, the long white spine. Mountains such as Tititia are considered ancestors, places where the spiritual world touches the physical. In this worldview, the peaks are not inert, they are living, watching, breathing with the memory of those who have come before. To walk through these valleys or to camp beneath Aspiring's peak is, in a sense, to be embraced by the spirits of the land. Despite its remoteness, the area surrounding Mount Aspiring is surprisingly accessible to those willing to venture beyond the pavement. Wanaka, a lakeside town that lies to the southeast of the mountain, serves as the primary gateway to the national park. From here, trampers and mountaineers alike begin their journeys, some heading for multi-day hikes through glacier-carved valleys, others venturing into alpine huts poised at the foot of the high peaks. The huts themselves, such as the famed French Ridge Hut or the Colin Todd Hut, are perched like secrets on the slopes, places of refuge where stories are shared and plans are made by the flicker of headlamps and the warmth of freeze-dried meals. Yet even from afar, Aspiring's influence is palpable. Artists paint it, poets write of it. Helicopter tours and scenic flights buzz occasionally overhead, their passengers catching brief glimpses of the frozen kingdom below. And for locals, the mountain is a compass, a point of orientation, of beauty, and of pride. It is a place that reminds people of what New Zealand is: wild, unyielding, sacred. There is a profound paradox at the core of Mount Aspiring. It is both accessible and untouchable. It draws people in, yet remains untouched in its upper realms, guarded by ice and wind and the laws of nature that allow no compromise. To see it from a distance is awe-inspiring. To stand on its summit is a privilege earned with blood, sweat, and soul. And whether viewed from the valleys below or felt beneath the soles of a cramped boot, it remains one of the most unreal places on the planet. Not because it is impossible, but because it feels like a perfect dream rendered in snow and stone. When the light fades over Tititia and the shadow of the mountain stretches across the glacier like a sleeping titan, it is easy to believe you are witnessing the end of the world, or perhaps its beginning. In this place, time slows, breath deepens, and everything else falls away until only the mountain remains. Eternal, glistening, and impossibly, perfectly real. There's a moment, just before dawn breaks over the Pacific Northwest, when the air grows still, and the mist lifts gently from the lakes scattered like glass mirrors across the wilderness. In this quiet space between night and day, a perfect reflection appears, snow-covered, symmetrical, and timeless. Mount Hood rises above it all, its glacial peak mirrored so flawlessly in the water below that sky and earth seem to fold into one. Located in northern Oregon, Mount Hood is a stratovolcano standing at 11,240 feet, 3,426 meters, making it the highest point in the state and one of the most iconic peaks in the Cascade Range. Its shape is unmistakable, a towering, elegant cone that dominates the skyline from Portland and beyond, looming like a watchful guardian of the forests and rivers that sprawl in every direction. This mountain is not just a geological formation. It is a living presence, visible from over 100 miles away on a clear day and deeply embedded in the cultural and natural fabric of the region. Mount Hood has long been revered, not only by outdoor adventurers and mountaineers but by the indigenous peoples who lived in its shadow for millennia. Known as Wy East to the Multnomah tribe, Mount Hood is more than a landmark, it is a being, a central figure in native legends. One famous tale tells of a great chief who quarreled with other mountain spirits over a beautiful maiden. In the ensuing battle, his rage carved valleys, scattered lava, and solidified his pride into a frozen peak, Wy East, forever watching over the Columbia River. Mount Hood is classified as a stratovolcano, formed over hundreds of thousands of years through the layering of lava flows, ash, and volcanic debris. Though it last erupted in the 1860s, it is still considered potentially active by geologists, and fumaroles near the summit release steam in quiet warning that the earth beneath remains alive. Despite this, the mountain has become a beloved symbol of serenity, its snowy cap glowing pink in the sunrise, and its slopes drawing thousands of visitors year-round. It's a mountain of contrasts, quiet yet powerful, serene yet simmering, accessible yet deeply wild. One of the most surreal aspects of Mount Hood is how it interacts with water and light. Around its base lie a series of alpine lakes so clear and still that they serve as nature's perfect mirrors. Trillium Lake, perhaps the most famous of these, lies directly to the south of the mountain and offers one of the most iconic views in North America. On windless mornings, the reflection of Mount Hood in its waters is so precise, so flawless, that it seems like an illusion, a symmetrical world turned upside down, where the sky meets itself in an ethereal convergence. Lost Lake, to the northwest, offers a similarly mystical view, its dark blue waters fringed with dense forest and framed by the snowy cone of Hood beyond. These lakes, often surrounded by stands of Douglas fir and hemlock, are not just picturesque. They are places of deep stillness, where time slows and the rhythms of the forest return to primacy. On summer mornings, the air is filled with the cries of osprey and the rustle of deer moving through the underbrush. On winter evenings, when snow blankets everything and ice crusts the water's edge, silence reigns supreme, broken only by the distant moan of wind over the summit or the crack of frozen branches shifting under weight. Climbing Mount Hood is a rite of passage for many in the Pacific Northwest. It is considered one of the most climbed glaciated peaks in the world, and though it is accessible to relatively fit hikers with the right equipment and conditions, it is by no means an easy ascent. The most common route, via the south side from Timberline Lodge, begins at night, with climbers setting out under headlamps to reach the summit at sunrise. The route crosses snowfields and steep ridges and passes through an area known as the Hog's Back, a sharp, icy spine that leads to the final push. Depending on conditions, climbers must navigate bergschrunds, crevasses that open where the moving glacier pulls away from the upper slope, and deal with loose volcanic rock and shifting ice. The experience of standing on Hood's summit is one of spiritual elevation. On a clear day, you can see as far as Mount St. Helens, Mount Adams, and even Mount Rainier to the north, each a sentinel of the Cascade Arc, each shaped by fire and time. Below, the Columbia River snakes through a patchwork of forests, fields, and towns, while clouds swirl in great cotton billows beneath your feet. The light up here is sharp, unfiltered, and deeply quiet. No hum of roads, no city noise. Just wind. Just sky. Just the distant cry of a raven circling far below. Timberline Lodge, located on the mountain's southern flank at about 6,000 feet, adds another surreal layer to the mountain's mythos. Built during the Great Depression as part of a Works Progress Administration project, it is an architectural masterpiece. Massive stone and timber construction with hand-carved details, ironwork, and a central fireplace as grand as any cathedral's altar. It has served as a base for climbers, skiers, and travelers for decades, and even played a role in pop culture history as the exterior of the Overlook Hotel in Stanley Kubrick's The Shining. Yet despite its fame, the lodge maintains a deep respect for the mountain, with every beam and brick seeming to echo the weight of the peak that rises above it. Surrounding Mount Hood is a vast wilderness of trails, rivers, and forested ridges that reveal the mountain from every angle. The Timberline Trail, a 40-mile loop encircling the peak, offers one of the most immersive mountain experiences on the continent. Hikers traverse glacial streams, traverse volcanic plateaus, and wander through high meadows exploding with lupine and paintbrush in the summer. Each bend in the trail offers a new perspective, sometimes close enough to touch the ice, other times stepping back to view the mountain as a grand, untouchable sculpture. What makes Mount Hood truly unreal is not just its shape, or its reflection, or its spiritual presence. It's the way it manages to be so many things at once. It is a volcano and a cathedral, a wilderness and a playground, a geological force and a cultural icon. It exists in the everyday, visible from city skylines, used as a directional marker, seen in art and logos, yet remains ineffably wild. No matter how many times you see it, no matter how close you stand, it remains slightly out of reach. Something about its perfection feels borrowed from another world. And when the day ends and the sun sets behind its summit, casting the sky in a blaze of gold and crimson, Mount Hood returns to its truest self, a sleeping giant. Reflected in still water, a dream made of stone and snow, glowing quietly beneath the stars. In the remote wilds of the Caucasus Mountains, where sheer rock walls scrape the sky and ancient monasteries cling to the edges of cliffs, rises a peak shrouded in both mist and myth, Mount Kazbek. Towering at 5,033 meters, 16,512 feet, it is one of the highest mountains in Georgia and the entire Caucasus Range, a glaciated sentinel that has witnessed empires rise and fall, and whose very presence seems to stir something primordial in the heart. This is no ordinary mountain. It is a place where geology and legend, ice and fire, heaven and earth converge. Mount Kazbek, known as Mkinvartsvary in Georgian, literally Glacier Peak, sits in the far north of the country, near the border with Russia, above the historic town of Stepantsminda, formerly Kazbegi. From the town's quiet streets, flanked by stone houses and grazing cattle, the mountain rises with startling abruptness, an enormous, snow-capped pyramid that seems to pierce the heavens. Its glacial slopes gleam white even in summer, reflecting light with a purity that gives it a kind of celestial glow, especially at dawn when the first rays of the sun ignite its eastern face in hues of rose gold and flame. But the beauty of Kazbek is only the surface of its story. Beneath that frozen majesty lies a volcano, long dormant, its last known eruption occurring over 1,000 years ago. The cone of Kazbek is part of the larger volcanic arc of the Caucasus, born from the collision of tectonic plates that continue to shape the region to this day. Like many stratovolcanoes, its summit hides a caldera, now sealed in centuries of ice and snow. Glacier flow from its flanks, most notably the Djegeti Glacier, a massive sheet of ancient ice that carves its slow path down the southeastern side, feeding rivers below and reflecting the movement of time in imperceptible inches. The spiritual weight of this mountain is as massive as its physical presence. In Georgian Orthodox tradition, Kazbek is deeply sacred, a towering altar that reaches toward God. But it's in older mythologies that Kazbek takes on its most unreal, most haunting role. Georgian legend holds that Kazbek is the mountain where Amirani, the Georgian Prometheus, was chained by the gods as punishment for bringing fire to mankind. According to the tale, Amirani defied the deities to deliver knowledge and power to humanity. As punishment, he was bound with iron chains to the cliffs of Kazbek, condemned to eternal torment beneath the ice and rock, just as Prometheus was fastened to the Caucasus in Greek myth. The story paints Kazbek not just as a mountain, but as a prison for a titan, a place where divine justice and defiance remain locked in eternal struggle. That myth lingers in the air around the mountain, lending it a solemn gravity that seems to pulse beneath the surface. It's hard not to feel it when standing beneath its towering ridges, hard not to wonder what secrets lie entombed in its glacier, what dreams or warnings echo through its crags. This is a mountain that doesn't just loom over a landscape, it inhabits it, breathes through it. And at its feet, nestled on a grassy plateau some 2,170 meters above sea level, stands one of the most iconic landmarks in the Caucasus, the Djegeti Trinity Church. Built in the 14th century, this solitary stone chapel sits in sublime contrast against the backdrop of Kazbek's icy heights. From below, it appears like a tiny watchtower in the face of infinity. From within, it feels like the center of the world. Pilgrims and travelers alike hike the steep trail from Stepantsminda to reach the church, following a winding path that offers glimpses of the mountain through breaks in the forest canopy. By the time the summit comes into full view, rising behind the ancient church, the effect is transcendent. Stone and sky, faith and fire aligned in a single, breathtaking composition. For mountaineers, Kazbek is both challenge and revelation. Though not as technically demanding as nearby Dykh Tau or Ushba, it is still a serious climb, requiring ice axes, crampons, and knowledge of glacier travel. Weather conditions on the mountain can change rapidly and without warning. Clear skies can become violent whiteouts in minutes, and hidden crevasses await the unwary. The standard route to the summit follows the Djegeti Glacier, beginning near the old meteorological station at around 3,600 meters. From there, climbers ascend the icy slopes in a long, steady arc, navigating crevasse fields, ridgelines, and the final steep push to the summit. Reaching the top is a moment of pure isolation and majesty. The horizon stretches in all directions, an unbroken expanse of mountain upon mountain, some jagged and dark, others soft with snow, all lit with a clarity only the high altitudes can offer. The winds here sing with an ancient voice. The ice beneath your feet whispers of buried time. And in the stillness, it becomes easy to believe that gods once walked here, that perhaps they still do. But Kazbek is not only a place for the elite climber or the solitary mystic. In the warmer months, its lower slopes come alive with alpine wildflowers, edelweiss, forget-me-nots, and yellow alpine poppies sway in the breeze alongside bees and butterflies. Shepherds guide flocks across green meadows, their dogs barking in the distance. The rivers run cold and pure, fed by the snowfields above. There is a gentler side to Kazbek. one that welcomes and nourishes even as the summit remains distant and remote. The juxtaposition of extremes is what makes Mount Chirripó so utterly unreal. It is at once fiercely untouchable and warmly life-giving. It serves as a battleground for titanic myths and as a cradle for human life. It demands respect but offers serenity. Its glacial armor hides volcanic fire, and its legends carry the weight of gods and rebels. To stand before it, whether from the green slopes below or the icebound summit, is to feel both humbled and elevated. At twilight, when the sun dips behind the ridgelines and the peak glows with fading light, the shadows of history stretch long across the valley. The silence becomes heavy with meaning, and one senses that the mountain is watching. Always watching. Always waiting. It does not boast. It does not beckon. It simply is, eternal, unyielding, and wrapped in the kind of mystery that speaks not just to the mind, but to the soul. Rising abruptly from the lush rainforests of Borneo like a fortress hewn from the bones of the earth, Mount Kinabalu commands the sky with a stark grandeur that defies the imagination. Standing at 4,095 meters, 13,435 feet, it is the tallest mountain in Southeast Asia and a towering sentinel over the Malaysian state of Sabah. But Kinabalu's height is only the beginning of its wonder. What makes this mountain truly unreal is its fusion of raw geological majesty with one of the most diverse and exotic ecosystems on the planet. It is not just a mountain, it is a world unto itself, a vertical garden of ancient life and shifting clouds, of stone spires, rare orchids, and whispers of spirits in the mist. Mount Kinabalu is located within Kinabalu Park, Malaysia's first UNESCO World Heritage Site, and it is among the most biologically diverse places on Earth. Despite covering a relatively small area, the park is home to more than 5,000 plant species, over 1,000 types of orchids, hundreds of birds, and countless insects, amphibians, and mammals. It is a living museum of evolution, a cradle where tropical and temperate ecosystems collide and intertwine in dazzling complexity. The mountain's rapid rise from sea level to over 4,000 meters has created distinct climatic zones, from lowland rainforests and cloud forests to subalpine meadows and near-Arctic scrublands, all stacked like shelves of a botanical temple. The lower slopes of Kinabalu are cloaked in dense, emerald rainforest. Here, massive dipterocarp trees soar toward the sky, draped in vines and epiphytes. The air is heavy with humidity and life. The calls of hornbills echo through the canopy, cicadas buzz with electric persistence, and rare butterflies, some as large as a human hand, flit among the leaves. It is a realm that feels untouched by time. Streams wind through mossy rocks, and every surface seems to bloom with moss, fungi, or flowers. Pitcher plants, some large enough to trap small animals, grow in shady crevices, their crimson mouths open like organic lanterns. Borneo's famed Nepenthes raja, the largest carnivorous plant in the world, thrives here in nutrient-poor soil, luring and digesting insects with a quiet patience born of evolution's long hand. Climbing higher, the forest begins to change. The towering trees give way to cloud forest, where twisted trunks are coated in thick layers of moss and lichen, and the mists gather like breathing veils. The air becomes cooler and thinner, and with it comes a sense of quiet reverence. Rhododendrons bloom in bursts of color, orange, crimson, purple, against a backdrop of dark green leaves. Giant ferns spread their fronds like ancient antennae, and wild orchids sprout from every conceivable surface, their delicate flowers. Bright against the subdued landscape. As elevation increases, the vegetation grows sparse and stunted. The air is crisp, the wind persistent. Here, in the alpine zone, the true shape of Kinabalu emerges. Massive granite outcroppings and bare stone ridges that reach upward in jagged spires and undulating domes. The summit plateau, known as Lowe's Peak Plateau, is a surreal expanse of smooth, wind-swept granite that seems more lunar than terrestrial. It is an alien landscape, grey, cracked, and immense. On some mornings, clouds gather in the valleys below, creating the illusion that the summit floats above the world. The highest point, Lowe's Peak, rises subtly from this granite plain, marked by a small summit sign but surrounded by infinite space. The journey to the summit of Kinabalu is both accessible and profound. Unlike many high-altitude peaks, Kinabalu requires no technical climbing skills, which makes it a unique pilgrimage for both seasoned hikers and first-time trekkers. The ascent is typically completed in 2 days. The first day takes climbers from Timpahan Gate through a rich stretch of tropical and montane forest to the Panalaban base camp. The second day begins before dawn, with a slow and reverent climb up the final granite slopes under a canopy of stars. As the sun begins to rise, Lowe's Peak is bathed in golden light, revealing sweeping views across the Crocker Range and out toward the South China Sea. It is a moment of quiet triumph and deep humility, one of the most emotionally resonant summit experiences anywhere on Earth. But Kinabalu is more than just a mountain to be climbed. It is a sacred place, revered by the local Dusun people as the resting place of their ancestors' spirits. According to Dusun belief, the souls of the departed ascend the mountain to reside in peace among its peaks. The very name Kinabalu is believed to derive from the words Okinabalu, meaning the revered place of the dead. For centuries, rituals and offerings were made at the mountain's base to honor these spirits, and even today, certain parts of the mountain remain spiritually significant and off-limits. Climbers are asked to show respect not just for the environment, but for the cultural and spiritual heritage embedded in every stone. This sense of reverence is amplified by the mountain silence. Despite its popularity, there are stretches along the trail where all sound drops away save for wind and the crunch of boots on gravel. In these moments, Kinabalu feels alive, not merely a place, but a presence. The granite underfoot radiates a quiet heat. The clouds whisper and curl around spires and gullies. The forest below moves and breathes with an intelligence too old to measure. To be on Kinabalu is to feel the world not just as a collection of places and facts, but as a living, breathing whole. And yet, Kinabalu is also a place of fragility. Its ecosystems are delicate, shaped by millennia of stable climate and now threatened by rapid change. Some endemic species, like the Kinabalu giant redleach or the Kinabalu giant earthworm, exist nowhere else on Earth and are especially vulnerable to temperature shifts and human impact. Conservation efforts within the park are ongoing, but the future of Kinabalu's biodiversity remains tied to our broader decisions about the environment. That a place so rich, so ancient, so utterly irreplaceable could be endangered makes its beauty even more poignant. At sunset, when the light fades across the granite domes and the forest below begins its nocturnal symphony, Kinabalu becomes a mountain of shadows and echoes. The stars emerge, brilliant and close, and the wind sings through the spires like a forgotten lullaby. In that silence, one feels the gravity of the place, the weight of its mythologies, and the delicate miracle of its life. Mount Kinabalu is unreal not in the sense of fantasy, but in the way that certain truths are immense, humbling, and just barely comprehensible. It is a place where stone becomes sky, where plants defy reason, where spirits move quietly through the mist. And in that convergence of form and story, it becomes not only one of the most beautiful mountains in the world, but one of the most essential. High above the sapphire blue waters of Lake Ringedalsvatn in the wilds of western Norway, a slab of stone juts horizontally from the mountainside like the outstretched tongue of some slumbering giant. This surreal formation, known as Trolltunga, the troll's tongue, defies all expectation. Suspended nearly 700 meters, 2,300 feet, above the glacial lake below, it is one of the most breathtaking, vertigo-inducing, and otherworldly places on Earth. Few natural wonders blend awe, fear, and elation quite like Trolltunga. It does not merely offer a view, it delivers a complete psychological and sensory recalibration, daring visitors to confront the immensity of nature and the fragility of the self within it. Located near the village of Skjeggedal in Vestland County, Norway, Trolltunga is the result of glacial sculpting that occurred over 10,000 years ago during the last ice age. As glacier advanced and retreated across the Scandinavian landscape, they carved the granite bedrock into bold, dramatic shapes. Trolltunga was formed when a large block of stone cracked and eventually separated from the main mountain mass, leaving behind this thin, cantilevered rock that now hangs in mid-air, seemingly defying gravity. With no visible support from below, it juts out into space, sharp-edged, narrow, and impossibly poised, offering what may be the most astonishing natural platform in the world. Reaching Trolltunga is no small feat. The hike to the cliff is a demanding 27-kilometer, about 17-mile, round trip, with over 1,200 meters, 3,900 feet, of elevation gain. It typically takes 8 to 12 hours to complete, depending on fitness level, weather, and trail conditions. The route winds through alpine meadows, boggy terrain, rocky outcrops, and snowfields, transitioning between ecosystems as it ascends into the upper mountain realms. There are no roads, no shortcuts. The only way to see the tongue is to earn it, with sweat, stamina, and sheer willpower. The trail begins in the valley, passing through thick pine forest and beside waterfalls that pour down from distant cliffs. Gradually, the trees thin out, replaced by low shrubs and moss-covered stone. Views open up to reveal the sheer granite walls of the Hardangervidda Plateau, an expansive wilderness of bare rock and icy lakes. As hikers climb higher, the terrain becomes stark and wind-scoured, resembling a moonscape. Cairns mark the way across the rocky expanse, guiding the pilgrim toward a climax that feels mythic in scale. The final approach to Trolltunga comes with an almost electric anticipation. The tongue itself is not visible until the very end, concealed by a final rise in the terrain. Then, suddenly, it appears, hovering above the void, sharp and narrow, with only sky and water beyond it. Standing on it is a test of nerve. There are no guardrails, no ropes, no barriers between the edge of the stone and the 700-meter drop below. Those who dare to step out onto it must confront not only the vastness of the space, but the visceral awareness of their own mortality. Every breath feels louder. Every heartbeat echoes. And yet, countless people do it. Some pose for photos, arms outstretched. Others sit quietly, legs dangling into the abyss. For a moment, they are suspended between earth and sky, the wind whispering across ancient stone beneath their feet. The view from Trolltunga is staggering. Below, the fjord-like Ringedalsvatn stretches in a perfect serpentine curve, its glacial waters reflecting the sky in shifting shades of blue and silver. Beyond that, mountains rise in every direction, sharp peaks and rounded domes, streaked with snow even in midsummer. Clouds drift between them, catching on ridges and casting moving shadows over the landscape. The silence is vast, broken only by the occasional call of a raven or the distant echo of wind. Here, nature exists on a scale beyond words. It is cathedral-like, cosmic, and intimate all at once. Part of what makes Trolltunga so surreal is not just its appearance, but its setting. Norway's fjordlands are already among the most dramatic landscapes in the world, shaped by millennia of glacial movement and tectonic uplift. Cliffs rise vertically from deep, cold waters. Waterfalls tumble hundreds of meters from unseen lakes. The air is crisp and scented with pine and ice. In such a land, even the sky feels closer, the stars brighter. Trolltunga, perched at the edge of all this, becomes a literal and symbolic threshold, a place where you are not just looking at nature, but immersed in its raw presence. Despite its fame, Trolltunga retains a kind of solemn purity. The hike deters casual tourists, and the unpredictable mountain weather can turn back even the most prepared. Rain, fog, and snow can descend in minutes, transforming the trail into a slick, hazardous gauntlet. Rescue services are limited, and every year brings stories of hikers needing airlift evacuation after misjudging the elements. Trolltunga is beautiful, but it is not tame. It demands respect, humility, and preparation. And in return, it offers one of the most transcendent experiences that can be found on land. Cultural folklore adds yet another layer of depth. Norway's name for the cliff, the Troll's Tongue, speaks to a long tradition of myth and storytelling. Trolls, in Norse mythology, are powerful beings of the mountains, ancient and slow, often turned to stone by the sun. The shape of the cliff resembles a tongue sticking out in playful defiance, as if a petrified troll lies just beneath the rock, caught mid-gesture for eternity. This whimsical, eerie image adds a layer of the supernatural to the already surreal formation. It feels entirely plausible that the stone could be alive, or was once. Even in modern times, this sense of magic persists. Trolltunga has become a place of personal pilgrimage for people from all over the world. Solo travelers seeking solitude, couples proposing on the edge of the void, artists painting the light, and storytellers drawing from the raw drama of the place. It is where fears are faced, boundaries are tested, and moments are lived with such intensity that they imprint themselves on memory like flame on parchment. And when the day ends, and the last hikers begin their long return trek through the shifting light, Trolltunga remains, silent, suspended, eternal. The sun dips behind distant peaks, casting the landscape in hues of amber and violet. Fog begins to settle into the valley like an ancient breath. The tongue becomes a silhouette, then a shadow, then simply part of the mountain again, waiting for the next sunrise and the next soul brave enough to walk its narrow edge. Trolltunga is one of the most unreal places on Earth, not because it is implausible, but because it exists at the exact intersection of geology, myth, and the human spirit. It is not just a cliff. It is a test, a poem, a story that must be walked to be understood. In a world increasingly mapped, photographed, and simulated, Trolltunga still surprises, still humbles, still whispers, "Here, you are small, and that is beautiful." In the heart of Papua New Guinea, where dense rainforests stretch over crumpled highlands and clouds cling to every ridge like silent sentinels, rises a mountain as enigmatic as the land it watches over, Mount Wilhelm. At 4,509 meters, 14,793 feet, it is the highest peak in Papua New Guinea and the entire Oceania region outside of Indonesia, yet it remains one of the least known and most mystifying giants on the planet. Remote, wrapped in perpetual mist, and pulsing with a raw, almost spiritual energy, Mount Wilhelm is not simply a mountain. It is a realm caught between worlds, the tropical and the alpine, the ancient and the ethereal, the physical and the sacred. Part of the Bismarck Range, Mount Wilhelm straddles the boundary between three of Papua New Guinea's provinces, Chimbu, Jiwaka, and Madang. Its flanks are home to a stunning diversity of ecosystems, layered in bands as the elevation rises. Unlike the sterile alpine environments of many high peaks, Wilhelm breathes with an extraordinary vitality. It begins in humid, mossy jungles and ends in jagged, frost-laced heights, passing through layers of biological wonder rarely seen in such condensed space. This vertical biodiversity makes the mountain a naturalist's dream and an explorer's challenge, a living laboratory of the Earth's evolutionary history. To set foot on Mount Wilhelm is to step into a world ruled not by human order, but by nature's oldest rhythms. The lower slopes are tangled in dense montane forest, thick with pandanus trees, giant ferns, and towering hardwoods cloaked in epiphytes. The air here is warm and heavy with moisture, filled with the calls of birds of paradise, whose iridescent plumage seems to flash like liquid gemstones through the canopy. Insects hum in every shade, and the ground squelches underfoot with a loamy richness. The forest is alive, not only biologically, but mythologically. For the many tribal communities who live in the surrounding valleys, the mountain is a sacred being, alive with ancestral spirits, protective and capricious, watching the actions of those who dare to tread its slopes. As the trail winds upward, the trees thin out, and the landscape begins to shift. Mist rolls in almost daily, snaking between ridges and softening the angles of the terrain. This mist is more than weather, it feels like memory, or time made visible, clinging to every rock and fold in the land. Subalpine meadows open up in patches, dotted with mosses, lichens, and hardy shrubs. Small alpine lakes appear in hollows, their surfaces dark and still, like mirrors for the sky. In this middle ground, the air is cooler, thinner. Sounds carry differently. Voices are muffled. Footsteps seem to echo from far away. At higher elevations, the mountain begins to strip itself bare. Grass gives way to scree and jagged volcanic rock, the remnants of ancient eruptions and geologic shifts that once shaped this part of the island with violent, unpredictable force. Frost crusts the stones in the early morning, and the clouds below stretch like oceans of cotton wool, obscuring the world left behind. Occasionally, clearings in the mist reveal impossible vistas, jagged ridges plunging into green valleys, distant peaks rising like islands through the cloud cover. It is a perspective rarely afforded to those who do not fly. Here, you walk among the sky. The route to the summit is not technically demanding, but it is long and taxing, made more difficult by the unpredictable weather and the lack of infrastructure. The most common approach begins from Kegelsugal village and involves a 2- or 3-day journey that includes camping at base huts, navigating rock-strewn paths, and rising before dawn to make the final push to the top. The pre-dawn climb is often conducted in darkness, with headlamps illuminating the trail like a slow procession of stars moving up the mountainside. The summit itself, when reached, is a knife-edged ridge of weathered stone, sometimes coated in rime ice, always exposed to the wind. And then comes the reward, the view from the top of Oceania. If the clouds permit, you can see from the highlands to the lowland rainforests, across volcanic ridges and deep river gorges, all the way to the shimmering blue line of the Bismarck Sea. There is no human noise here, no roads, no air traffic, no cities. Only the whisper of the wind, the slow dance of clouds, and the sharp, crystalline silence of altitude. It is not the kind of summit where flags are planted and phones light up. It is the kind of place where people fall quiet, where breath catches not from exertion alone, but from reverence. And always, there is the mountain's mysterious presence. Mount Wilhelm holds an almost supernatural grip on those who know it. There are countless stories, of spirits that dwell in the lakes, of lights that move across the ridges at night, of ancestral voices heard in dreams. Local lore speaks of sanguma, a term for sorcery or spiritual activity tied to the land. Travelers have reported strange feelings, visions, or powerful dreams while sleeping on the slopes. Whether one believes these tales or not, the atmosphere is undeniably charged. The mountain feels like more than stone and soil, it feels sentient. Despite its remoteness, Mount Wilhelm has played a symbolic role in Papua New Guinea's national identity. As the highest peak, it stands as a marker of unity in a country renowned for its cultural and linguistic diversity, where over 800 languages are spoken and traditional clan ties run deep. The mountain rises above all of that, literally and metaphorically, a neutral, ageless figure in a land of stories. It is a place where people from different backgrounds converge, climb, and stand shoulder to shoulder in the silence of the sky. Its biological significance is equally staggering. Mount Wilhelm and its surrounding ecosystems harbor endemic species found nowhere else on Earth. From tiny frogs that live only within a few hundred meters of elevation to orchids whose blooming is tied to obscure climate patterns, this mountain is a bastion of rare and fragile life. Scientists have only just begun to scratch the surface of its ecological secrets. Each expedition brings new discoveries, new plants, new insects, new understandings of how life can adapt to the extremes. And yet, it remains remarkably untouched by modern tourism. There are no luxury lodges, no paved roads to the top, no cable cars or commercialized viewpoints. Mount Wilhelm is earned, not bought. It remains raw, sacred, and personal. And in that purity lies its power. You do not visit this mountain casually. You approach it with preparation, humility, and respect. It is a teacher, a mirror, and, in many ways, a living myth. At sunset, when the temperature drops and the last golden rays stretch long across the granite peaks, Mount Wilhelm becomes a silhouette, a jagged crown on the horizon, crowned in mist and silence. The stars begin to pierce the darkening sky, unchallenged by city lights, and the southern constellations will slowly overhead. In this moment, alone or in quiet company, it is possible to feel something rare, a connection not only to the land but to something older, deeper, and more eternal than the human world usually allows. Mount Wilhelm is not just one of the most unreal places on Earth, it is one of the most profound. A place where nature is wild and unfiltered, where myth is not memory but presence, and where the climb is not only upward, but inward. Far beyond the blue cradle of Earth, past the veil of our atmosphere and across millions of kilometers of cold interplanetary void, rises a mountain so immense, so utterly staggering in scale, that it defies all terrestrial comparison. This is Olympus Mons, named after the mythic home of the Greek gods, a titanic shield volcano on Mars and the tallest known mountain in the entire solar system. At a height of approximately 21.9 kilometers, 13.6 miles or 72,000 feet, Olympus Mons soars nearly 3 times higher than Mount Everest, yet its proportions are so vast that it's massive. Base stretches over 600 kilometers in diameter, roughly equivalent to the size of the entire state of Arizona or the country of France. Its enormity is difficult to comprehend. Standing at the foot of Olympus Mons, were it possible, you wouldn't see a towering peak overhead. The mountain is so wide and its slopes so gradual, only a few degrees incline, that its summit would disappear over the curvature of Mars' surface, hidden by the very landscape it forms. From base to rim, it could take a hypothetical traveler days to walk its expanse. It is a mountain not of steep ascents and knife-edge ridges, but of endless lava plains and gentle arcs, shaped not by tectonic collision or sudden cataclysm, but by slow, persistent volcanic breathing across eons. Olympus Mons is a shield volcano, similar in structure to those found in Hawaii, such as Mauna Loa and Mauna Kea. These volcanoes are formed by the repeated outpouring of low-viscosity lava that spreads wide before cooling. Over time, this accumulation builds vast, gently sloping mountains rather than steep peaks. But while Earth's shield volcanoes are impressive, Mars gives them a scale of grandeur that defies our planet's limits. Olympus Mons, in particular, owes its unbelievable size to a combination of Martian characteristics: lower gravity, the lack of tectonic plate movement, and a crust that doesn't shift. On Earth, volcanic hotspots eventually move due to plate tectonics, creating chains of volcanoes like those in the Hawaiian archipelago. But on Mars, the crust remains relatively stationary. That means a volcanic hotspot can continue to erupt in the same location for millions of years. As lava flows accumulate, the mountain grows and grows, unimpeded by the kind of planetary recycling that limits terrestrial formations. Coupled with Mars' gravity, which is only about 38% that of Earth's, the lava can build higher without collapsing under its own weight. The result is Olympus Mons, the apex of Martian geology, a relic of unimaginable volcanic persistence. The caldera at the summit, the crater formed after the volcano last erupted, is itself a world of marvels. Measuring 80 kilometers across and up to 3 kilometers deep, it contains multiple nested collapse pits, each revealing episodes of past activity. The caldera's vastness dwarfs anything found on Earth. From rim to rim, it's so wide that if you stood on one edge, the other side would lie beyond the horizon. Shadows stretch endlessly, and even in Martian daylight, the sense of scale is disorienting. The crater is a solemn scar in the planet's surface, an ancient mouth that once poured rivers of fire. Though dormant today, Olympus Mons may not be entirely extinct. Its geological youth, estimated at around 200 million years, with some lava flows possibly younger than 2 million years, suggests that it could still harbor activity beneath its surface. On a planet known for its silence and stillness, the idea that Olympus Mons might one day breathe again carries a thrilling kind of suspense. Could it erupt again? If so, what would that look like on a planet with a paper-thin atmosphere and no active plate tectonics? The answers lie in future exploration. One of the most surreal aspects of Olympus Mons is not just its size or age, but the way it interacts, or doesn't, with its surroundings. Due to its incredible height, the upper slopes of Olympus Mons rise well above the average Martian atmosphere. This creates a kind of microclimate atop the volcano, where atmospheric pressure is so low that liquid water could not exist, even if it somehow found its way there. In fact, the summit may be one of the driest and coldest places on the entire planet. The base, however, especially near the surrounding plains known as the Tharsis region, may once have interacted with ancient flows of subsurface water or ice. The escarpment surrounding Olympus Mons is another anomaly. A cliff, or scarp, up to 6 kilometers high encircles much of the volcano's base, as though the ground beneath it has collapsed or been sheared away. This feature adds to the sense that the mountain was not merely built, it was forged by some planet-sized ritual, a process slow and incomprehensible in its scale. Landslides, lava deltas, and strange collapsed regions indicate a complex interplay between the mountain's mass and the Martian crust, hinting at ancient episodes of instability that must have shaped the landscape for hundreds of kilometers in every direction. Incredibly, Olympus Mons may one day serve as the setting for future human exploration, or even habitation. Mars has long captivated the imagination of scientists and storytellers alike, and if humanity establishes a presence on the Red Planet, Olympus Mons will surely be among its most legendary landmarks. Its high elevation could offer advantages for solar power collection, while its broad slopes might shelter future outposts from radiation and violent dust storms. The idea of humans walking along its ridges, descending into its caldera, or setting up scientific stations to monitor its seismic silence seems like the fulfillment of both scientific ambition and ancient myth. Even today, from orbit, Olympus Mons is visible to every probe and satellite that passes above. Its immense footprint dominates the western hemisphere of Mars, rising like a crown on the rust-colored skin of the planet. Images from spacecraft reveal its vast shadow, the softness of its contours, the subtle ridges left by lava flows long hardened. It is a monument not just to Mars, but to the universe's quiet and powerful artistry. And perhaps that's what makes Olympus Mons feel so unreal, not merely its size, but its loneliness. It stands alone, colossal and brooding, on a quiet world. No other mountain in the solar system approaches it. No city lights glow at its base. No rivers run down its sides. It watches the stars with unblinking silence, untouched by time, a cathedral of stone on a planet of wind and dust. In that stillness, it becomes something more than geological. It becomes myth made manifest. If Earth's mountains are symbols of endurance and spirit, then Olympus Mons is a symbol of cosmic magnitude. A reminder that beyond our oceans, beyond our blue sky, there are places so vast and strange they reshape the imagination. It is not just the tallest mountain we know, it is a whisper from Mars, a message in basalt and silence, telling us that the universe is still so much greater than we can see. In the southern reaches of the Peloponnese, where olive groves give way to craggy ridges and the Aegean wind carries whispers of ancient memory, a mountain range rises like the spine of a sleeping god, rugged, proud, and laced with myth. This is Mount Taygetus, the highest and most storied mountain system in the Peloponnese, and one of the most hauntingly beautiful landscapes in all of Greece. It is not merely a range of peaks and passes. It is a stage upon which history, mythology, and nature have danced for millennia. A place where Spartan warriors once trained, where nymphs were said to dwell in groves, and where the stones themselves seem to remember. Mount Taygetus, also spelled Taygetos, reaches its highest point at Prophetis Ilias, Prophet Elias, which rises to 2,407 meters, 7,897 feet, above sea level. The summit, often snow-capped in winter and glistening under the Mediterranean sun in summer, offers an unbroken view across the Laconian plain to the east, the Messenian Gulf to the west, and the deep blue arc of the sea in every direction. But Taygetus is not known merely for height, it is known for presence. The mountain commands attention not through grandeur alone, but through the weight of legend and the texture of time layered upon its slopes. The range forms a natural barrier between the ancient regions of Laconia and Messenia. Its sheer ridges, dense pine forests, and inaccessible passes once made it both a place of refuge and exile, a border and a sanctuary. The terrain is sharply divided. On the Laconian side, the mountains rise steeply and dramatically from the valley. On the Messenian side, they descend more gently into rolling hills and fertile plains. This geographical duality reflects a deeper thematic one. Taygetus is both protector and executioner, sacred grove and deadly precipice, revered and feared in equal measure. Perhaps nowhere is this more poignantly illustrated than in the ancient stories of Sparta. To the Spartans, who prized strength, discipline, and purity above all, Taygetus was both a symbol of harsh beauty and a grim instrument of social order. According to historical accounts, though still debated by scholars, it was here, on one of the mountain's shadowed cliffs known as the Apothete, that unfit or deformed Spartan infants were abandoned to die. Whether this practice was widespread or largely symbolic, the narrative took deep root in cultural memory. The mountain became more than terrain. It became a moral wall against weakness, a physical reflection of Spartan values carved in stone and silence. Yet Taygetus is not merely a Spartan relic. It is deeply woven into the older fabric of Greek mythology. Its very name originates from Taygete, one of the 7 Pleiades, daughters of the Titan Atlas and the sea nymph Pleione. Taygete was said to be beloved by Zeus, though she fled his advances and hid herself in the forests of this mountain, placing the land forever under her name. The Pleiades later became a constellation, eternally visible in the Greek night sky. Thus, the mountain carries not only earthbound significance, but celestial connection, its ridges mirroring starlight, its groves echoing the tales of gods and nymphs. The slopes of Taygetus are rich in biodiversity. Pine, fir, and chestnut trees dominate the higher elevations, while olive, cypress, and wild herbs flourish lower down. In spring, the hillsides explode in a riot of color. Wild thyme, anemones, crocuses, and orchids bloom in fragrant carpets, attracting bees and butterflies in shimmering swarms. The air is perfumed with rosemary and sage, and the whisper of wind through pine needles is constant, like the murmuring of ancient voices. Fauna here are equally diverse. Eagles soar along the thermal currents near the cliffs, wild boars root through the undergrowth, and elusive lynx and foxes leave quiet prints in the dust. Herds of goats and sheep graze along the lower slopes, their bells chiming softly as they move, watched over by shepherds whose practices have changed little over centuries. The mountain is a refuge, a reservoir of life amid a land often shaped by sun and stone. Taygetus is crisscrossed with ancient paths and mule tracks, many of which trace their origins back to Mycenaean times. In the cool dawn light, walking along one of these trails feels like stepping into a dream where time runs backward. Cypress roots curl over worn stones. Arched stone bridges stretch over dry riverbeds. Byzantine churches and hidden monasteries emerge from the forest, their faded frescoes bearing witness to the mountain's long spiritual history. Moni Fanaramini, Panagia Jatrissa, and the fortified monastery of Golas are but a few of the religious enclaves tucked away in remote glens, accessible only by foot or donkey. One of the most striking features of Taygetus is its otherworldly silence. Away from the modern villages and scattered hamlets, such as Anavriti, Mistras, or Parori, the mountain grows quiet in a way that feels elemental. It is not an absence of sound, but a fullness of stillness. The hush of pine needles underfoot, the distant knock of a woodpecker, the flutter of a hawk's wings overhead. This stillness carries a kind of gravity. It compels reflection. It feels ancient. The mountain also harbors one of the most magnificent archaeological sites in all of Greece, the medieval Byzantine city of Mistras, situated on its northeastern slope. Once the seat of the despotate of the Morea, Mistras flourished in the 14th and 15th centuries as a cultural and intellectual hub. Today, its ruined palaces, churches, and walls are scattered like bones across the hill, their outlines softened by moss and time. From the heights of Mistras, one can see the whole Eurotas valley below, once the breadbasket of Sparta, now a patchwork of orchards, olive groves, and memory. For hikers and seekers of solitude, Taygetus offers some of the most challenging and rewarding treks in Greece. The climb to Prophytis Ilias, the highest peak, is often undertaken in summer, when snow has receded and the skies open into vast, uninterrupted blue. Pilgrims and mountaineers often begin their ascent from the village of Anavriti or from the refuge at Varvara. The summit is marked not only by a small chapel, but by sweeping, godlike views that reach across the Peloponnese to the sea on both sides, and sometimes, on the clearest days, as far as the mountains of Crete. At night, the summit transforms. Under the vault of stars, the mountain becomes something altogether mythic. The Milky Way spills across the sky like a river of light. The wind, cold and endless, hums across the stones. In such a place, it is easy to believe the old stories, that gods once stood here, or that heroes came to ask questions of the heavens. Taygetus seems to listen, to remember. It does not need to speak. Its presence is answer enough. Mount Taygetus is unreal not in its fiction, but in its layered reality. It is mountain, monument, and myth in one. It is the edge of Sparta's shadow, the echo of a nymph's footsteps, the whisper of ancient pines over stone. To walk its slopes is to traverse not just distance, but epochs. And to stand on its heights is to be held, just briefly, by the vast, patient hand of history. Rising like a mist-shrouded monarch over the lush heart of Mindanao, Mount Apo looms as the Philippines' tallest and most sacred peak, a sleeping giant crowned in cloud and cloaked in centuries of story. At 2,954 meters, 9,692 feet, this stratovolcano is not just the highest mountain in the country, but perhaps the most enigmatic. From its steaming vents and crater lakes to its moss-covered forests and thunderous waterfalls, Mount Apo is a place of extraordinary beauty and untamed power, where jungle meets sky and legend breathes through every root and stone. Known to the indigenous Bagobo and Manobo peoples as Apo Sandawa, a term that honors the mountain's status as a spiritual guardian, Mount Apo is steeped in mythology. To the local tribes, the peak is not merely a physical presence but a living spirit, the dwelling place of deities and ancestral souls. Offerings were, and in some cases, still are, made to appease the mountain spirit before an ascent. Even today, long after colonial influences and modern expansion, Apo remains a sacred site, not just a hiking destination. Pilgrimage, not tourism, is the older tradition here. The mountain is located within Mount Apo Natural Park, a protected area that spans over 72,000 hectares and includes several municipalities in Davao del Sur, Davao City, and North Cotabato. This vast expanse shelters one of the most biodiverse ecosystems in Southeast Asia. Within its embrace are cloud forests teeming with life, volcanic craters spewing sulfuric breath, and waterfalls so remote that their roar seems like the voice of the land itself. It is a realm of extremes, of steaming heat and sudden cold, of tangled jungle and barren volcanic plains, of beauty so raw it seems unreal. Ascent routes to the summit vary, but all begin with a deep immersion into tropical rainforest. Thick canopies of Lawan and Almasiga trees soar skyward, their trunks bound in vines and epiphytes, their branches heavy with moss. The undergrowth pulses with color and movement, Orchids bloom in hidden groves, giant ferns unfurl in spirals, and multicolored insects dart through shafts of light like fragments of stained glass. The air is thick with the scent of damp earth, tree sap, and blooming ginger, and the chorus of cicadas and birds is constant. Mount Apo is one of the last strongholds of the Philippine eagle, Pithecofaga jeffrey, the country's national bird and one of the largest, rarest raptors in the world. With wingspans reaching over 2 meters and talons capable of crushing bone, the eagle commands the canopy like a sky-bound predator of myth. Sightings are rare but unforgettable. Those lucky enough to see one gliding silently through the treetops often describe the experience as something more than natural, something that touches the realm of the divine. Climbing higher, the dense jungle gradually gives way to mossy forest, where twisted trunks and stunted trees are blanketed in green. This cloud forest, perpetually veiled in mist, seems suspended between earth and heaven. Visibility narrows, and every leaf glistens with moisture. Tree branches reach like skeletal arms through the fog, and the landscape becomes dreamlike, otherworldly. Here, time seems to slow. Every step feels deliberate, every sound amplified. Even seasoned hikers report a shift in perception, as if the mountain is revealing another version of reality, more primal, more true. Near the summit, the forest thins out entirely, replaced by fields of boulders, sulfur vents, and rocky ridges. The air smells of minerals and fire. Geysers of steam hiss from hidden vents, and the rocks are painted with streaks of yellow and orange, evidence of the volcanic forces still churning beneath. Mount Apo is considered dormant, but it is not dead. Its last confirmed eruption was in prehistoric times, but geothermal activity is everywhere. Pools bubble, stones are warm to the touch, and on cold mornings, the steam rises in ghostly pillars that dance across the slopes. The final push to the peak is steep and exposed. Loose scree and jagged rock demand careful footing. But with each step, the sky opens wider, and at last the summit comes into view, a wide, windswept plain punctuated by volcanic vents and a crater lake, sometimes glassy and serene, other times dark and boiling with energy. From here, on clear days, the view is limitless. The Davao Gulf glitters to the east, while ridgelines stretch in every direction, draped in mist and shadow. Forests, rivers, and distant towns unfold like a living map. But more often than not, the summit is cloaked in clouds. The wind bites, and the visibility collapses to mere meters. And yet, even in this obscured state, or perhaps because of it, the summit feels sacred, hidden, not absent. The fog is not an obstruction but a veil, a boundary between worlds. You stand not on top of the world, but at its intersection, between fire and water, earth and air, the known and the unknowable. Descending Mount Apo is not a retreat but a return, back into the lushness of the world below, now changed by what was witnessed above. The trails pass again through the jungle, but the sounds seem different, the light altered. One begins to notice smaller things, the iridescence of a beetle's shell, the way moss climbs up the back of a stone, the subtle fragrance of orchids blooming unseen in the understory. The climb up was about ascent, the climb down is about presence. Local communities living near the base of the mountain, including the Bagobo, Manobo, and other Lumad groups, continue to engage with Apo not just as a natural feature, but as an active part of their spiritual and cultural life. Ceremonies and rituals persist, often performed in small forest clearings or at sacred springs. Some of these practices are centuries old, passed down through oral traditions, while others have evolved to reflect the blending of indigenous and modern belief systems. In these acts, burning herbs, chanting prayers, laying offerings, the mountain is not honored as a memory, but as a living ancestor. Conservation efforts around Mount Apo have increased in recent decades, as awareness of its ecological and cultural importance has grown. Logging, poaching, and human encroachment have all posed serious threats, and illegal activities still persist. Yet there is also hope. Ecotourism, when done respectfully, has created both economic incentives for protection and opportunities for education. Mount Apo's continued survival rests in a delicate balance between reverence and responsibility. As twilight descends on the slopes of Apo, the jungle begins to stir with night life. Frogs call from hidden ponds, fireflies blink like floating embers, and the rustle of nocturnal creatures stirs the leaves. Above, the mountain's peak disappears once again into its familiar shroud. In that final light, Mount Apo becomes more than a summit. It becomes a living monument to the wild heart of the Philippines, a place where nature, myth, and memory converge in humid breath and volcanic stone. Mount Apo is unreal in the way true wonders are. Not because it denies reality, but because it deepens it. It reminds those who walk its trails that there are still places on Earth where the old stories breathe, where the jungle hides secrets older than empire, and where the sky touches the land in mist and reverence. In the haunting heart of Romania, rising like a jagged wall between ancient forests and forgotten fortresses, lie the FGR Mountains, some of the most wild, dramatic, and unreal landscapes in all of Europe. As the highest and most formidable section of the southern Carpathians, often referred to as the Transylvanian Alps, the FGR Mountains stretch over 70 kilometers in length, forming a serrated spine across the heart of the country. These mountains are where myth and wilderness collide, where sharp peaks pierce the sky like ancient swords, and where solitude, silence, and the memory of legends follow every trail and shadow. At the core of the range is Moldoviano Peak, Romania's highest point, soaring to 2,544 meters, 8,346 feet. Nearby is the nearly equal Vitia Mare, along with dozens of other snow-dusted summits and ridgelines that stretch to the horizon. Unlike the neatly sculpted peaks of the Alps or the gentle green domes of other European ranges, the FGR Mountains are steep, brooding, and angular. Their beauty is fierce and unfiltered. Razorback ridges plummet into glacier-carved valleys, alpine lakes shimmer in hidden hollows, and weathered cliffs echo with wind and wolves. They are a land that doesn't invite conquest, but demands respect. These mountains have long formed a natural fortress, and for centuries, they served as a barrier, geographical and symbolic, between Transylvania to the north and Wallachia to the south. This borderland status has imbued the FGR with an aura of independence and secrecy. Bandits and rebels once disappeared into their forests. Shepherds carved out secret routes through misty passes. Monks retreated to hidden monasteries in the woods, and resistance fighters, including those who defied the communist regime, used its rugged slopes as shelter well into the 20th century. The mountain's folds have always hidden more than just snow and stone. They have sheltered human defiance. Nature here is untamed. The FGR Massif is home to one of Europe's largest populations of brown bears, along with lynx, wolves, wild boar, red deer, and golden eagles. It is a stronghold of wilderness in a continent where so much has been subdued. The forests that cloak its lower slopes are dense and primal, dominated by beech, spruce, and fir. In the summer, their canopy flickers with sunlight and birdsong. In the winter, they become dark and quiet, laden with snow, their paths lost to ice and silence. Above the tree line, the landscape shifts into high alpine grasslands and glacial rock, harsh, wind-scoured terrain where only the hardiest plants cling to life. The jewel of the FGR Mountains may well be the Balia Lake, a glacial, mirror-like body of water nestled at 2,034 meters above sea level. Accessible by a winding road known as the Transgran Highway, the lake is surrounded by peaks that seem to crowd in protectively, their reflections turning its surface into a living painting. From this central point, trails branch out in every direction, leading to mountain huts, ridgelines, and summits. In winter, the lake freezes over and becomes the site of Europe's first ice hotel, a crystalline structure built entirely from the lake's frozen water, where guests sleep in rooms of ice under fur blankets, surrounded by glowing blue walls and utter silence. The Transgran itself is another wonder, an engineering marvel that snakes its way up and over the mountains in a series of hairpin turns, viaducts, and tunnels. Built during the regime of Nicolae Ceausescu in the 1970s as a strategic military route, the highway today is considered one of the most scenic roads in the world. Driving it is like ascending into myth. The road climbs through dense forest, crosses tumbling rivers, pierces the mountains via the 884-meter-long Balia Tunnel, the longest road tunnel in Romania, and emerges into a highland realm of wind and clouds. Jeremy Clarkson once called it the best driving road in the world, and it's easy to see why. But the road is only open in summer. Snow closes it for much of the year, leaving the high peaks to winter's dominion. Despite these modern touches, the deeper you go into the FGR, the older the world becomes. Many trails are ancient shepherd paths, winding through high meadows where sheep graze as they have for millennia. Stone shelters dot the hillsides, and shepherds still craft cheese over open fires, storing it in caves to mature. These high pastures, called stain in Romanian, echo with the sound of cowbells and the low hum of folk songs passed from grandfather to grandson. The culture here is as rugged as the landscape, shaped by isolation, resilience, and a deep reverence for the land. Legends swirl thick in the mountain air. It is said that the ghost of Vlad the Impaler, often considered the inspiration for Dracula, haunts these woods, having used secret mountain passes to flee invaders and hide his treasures. The mountain's remoteness and wildness have helped fuel this Gothic mystique, and Transylvania's shadowy fame has done the rest. But the deeper magic of the FGR lies not in blood-soaked castles, but in the living world, the mist that curls over a silent peak, the howl of a wolf echoing across a frozen ridge, the sudden appearance of a stag standing motionless in the snow. Hiking the full main ridge of the FGR is one of the most challenging treks in Eastern Europe, typically taking 6 to 8 days to complete. The trail spans nearly the entire length of the range, undulating along the spine of the Carpathians, and offering spectacular views in every direction. Some ridges narrow to just a few meters wide, with sheer drops on both sides. There are knife-edge crossings like Kustrashri that test a climber's nerves, and isolated bivouac shelters perched like watchtowers against the sky. Weather is unpredictable, and summer thunderstorms roll in with a violence that feels almost biblical. But for those who endure, the reward is a communion with one of Europe's last great wildernesses. Each evening in the FGR brings a silence that is deeper than sleep. As the sun sinks behind the crags, painting the peaks in gold and violet, and the wind dies down, a vast quiet settles over the mountains. Stars begin to pierce the darkening sky, unfiltered by pollution, sharp and ancient. Campfires crackle beside glacial lakes. Shadows stretch long over stone. And in that hush, the mountains reveal something essential, about nature, about time, and about the strange human longing to climb higher and see farther. The FGR mountains are unreal not because they defy logic, but because they refuse to be tamed. In a continent filled with paved paths and packaged experiences, they remain gloriously wild. They are Europe's untold secret, a cathedral of stone and snow where stories are whispered by the wind, and every step on the trail is a step back in time. Whether glimpsed through drifting mist or in the sharp clarity of a highland dawn, they leave an imprint that lingers long after the climb is over. In the sultry heart of the Colombian Caribbean, where steamy jungles spill into coffee plantations and coastal plains shimmer in equatorial heat, a titanic presence looms in complete contrast to its surroundings. Pico Cristóbal Colón, one of the 2 highest points in Colombia, rising to an estimated 5,730 meters, 18,800 feet, is both a geographic marvel and an existential paradox. A snow-capped colossus planted mere kilometers from palm-fringed beaches, its icy crown glittering above one of the most biodiverse, tropical landscapes on Earth. It stands alongside its twin, Pico Simon Bolivar, in the Sierra Nevada de Santa Marta range, an isolated massif so remote and so vertical it seems to be lifted directly from the dreams of ancient gods. The Sierra Nevada de Santa Marta is the world's highest coastal mountain range, and its tallest peaks, including Cristóbal Colón, are often called the highest coastal mountains in the world. Their dramatic rise, from sea level to snowline in just 42 kilometers, 26 miles, is unmatched anywhere else on the planet. This vertical thrust compresses entire climate zones into a single slope, from coastal mangroves and lowland jungle, through montane forests and cloud-veiled Paramo, to glacier that gleam beneath the tropical sun. It's like ascending the Earth's entire ecological ladder in a single climb, a feat few mountains can claim. Yet, despite its towering stature, Cristóbal Colón remains shrouded not only in mist, but in mystery. This is not a mountain of wide tourist trails and crowded summits. It is a rarely visited, fiercely protected peak. Access is notoriously difficult, not only because of its technical and environmental challenges, but due to its deep cultural significance and the geopolitical realities of the region. The Sierra Nevada is sacred land, home to 4 indigenous groups, the Kogi, Arhuaco, Wiwa, and Canquamo peoples. These communities consider the mountains to be the heart of the world, and the peaks, including Pico Cristóbal Colón, are seen as sacred elders, guardians of balance, and cosmic intermediaries between the earth and the sky. In the worldview of the Kogi and their kin, descendants of the ancient Tairona civilization, the Sierra Nevada is a living organism. The peaks are not inert stone, but sentient beings. Rivers that flow from the glacier are seen as the lifeblood of the planet, and every tree, bird, and stone has a place in the delicate equilibrium of the universe. Climbing Cristóbal Colón, in their tradition, is not a feat of sport, but a spiritual trespass. For this reason, the summit has long remained off-limits to outsiders, protected by both the physical inaccessibility of the terrain and the spiritual guardianship of its people. Even those with the means and permission to attempt the climb face a gauntlet of challenges. Unlike the well-trodden Andes or the accessible Alps, the Sierra Nevada remains largely uncharted by modern mountaineering. There are few established trails. Dense jungle, unpredictable weather, and political instability, sometimes including the presence of armed groups, have long deterred all but the most committed explorers. Only a handful of successful ascents of Pico Cristóbal Colón have been recorded, often involving complex negotiations with indigenous communities, navigation through trackless forest, and technical alpine climbing in unstable conditions. The ascent begins at sea level, in coastal towns like Santa Marta, where humid air smells of salt and mangoes, and vendors sell fruit beside the crashing surf. From there, the approach winds inland through a patchwork of banana plantations, past coffee fincas, and into thick, emerald-green jungle. The trail, if one exists at all, is more of a suggestion than a path. It threads through shadowy canopies dripping with orchids and vines, where howler monkeys scream from treetops and morpho butterflies flash like living jewels. Rivers rush cold and clear through the undergrowth, fed by glacier unseen high above. As climbers ascend, the environment shifts with surreal speed. The equatorial heat gives way to cool, misty highlands. The jungle floor transforms into cloud forest, where moss grows thick on every branch and giant tree ferns stretch toward the sky. Birdsong changes, becoming more ethereal and sparse. At around 3,000 meters, the forest breaks into Paramo, a haunting, high-altitude tundra unique to the Andes, filled with spiky frailjones and strange, silver-leaf plants adapted to frost and fog. The silence becomes more profound here. Wind moves differently. There is a feeling of great distance, not just from cities or roads, but from the ordinary world. Above the Paramo lies the mountain's final veil, a stretch of rocky, unstable slopes that give way to glacier gleaming under. Thin, icy air. Here, Pico Cristóbal Colón stands in its full, silent majesty, an icy throne of stone and sky. Few have seen this view in person. The snow is ancient, but melting. The summit, often cloaked in storm clouds, appears and disappears like a secret remembered by the earth itself. Some who have stood there describe an overwhelming sensation, not of conquest, but of humility, of standing in a place where the human presence feels impossibly small. In recent years, climate change has begun to gnaw at Cristóbal Colón's glacier. The once expansive ice fields have shrunk dramatically, retreating higher and higher each year. Satellite imagery reveals what the human eye can barely comprehend: the slow unraveling of an ancient ice crown, the dwindling of sacred rivers at their source. For the indigenous people of the Sierra, this is not just an environmental crisis, it is a spiritual trauma. The mountain, they say, is losing its breath. And yet, despite its vulnerability, Cristóbal Colón endures as a powerful symbol. To climbers, it represents the last of the truly wild peaks, unspoiled, uncommodified, and unreachable except by extraordinary effort and respect. To scientists, it is a beacon of biodiversity and a case study in the vertical compression of ecosystems. To the indigenous guardians of the Sierra, it is the sacred heart of the world, beating still beneath its thinning veil of snow. What makes Pico Cristóbal Colón unreal is not only its scale or rarity, but its coexistence of contradictions. It is a tropical glacier, a hidden titan, a mountain both ferocious and forbidden. It does not dazzle with tourist infrastructure or global fame, it humbles with its silence. It watches from the clouds while the sea crashes below, and it whispers to those who draw near that not all peaks are meant to be summit, and not all wonders are meant to be shared. To stand in its shadow, even from afar, is to feel the gravity of something ancient and necessary. Something untouched. Something sacred. In the emerald spine of Costa Rica, where mist curls like breath from the earth and howler monkeys stir the dawn with their primal calls, a singular peak rises above the clouds, remote, stoic, and quietly immense. This is Mount Chirripó, the highest point in the country and one of the most astonishing natural vantage points in Central America. At 3,821 meters, 12,536 feet, it may not rival the world's tallest giants in altitude, but what it offers is something altogether different, a moment where geography becomes transcendence. From its summit, on clear days, you can gaze out across the green patchwork of Costa Rica's valleys and ridgelines and see both the Pacific Ocean to the west and the Caribbean Sea to the east. Two great bodies of water shimmering like mirrors, separated only by the backbone of a continent. Mount Chirripó stands at the heart of Chirripó National Park, part of the Greater Talamanca Range, a rugged and geologically ancient region that stretches southeast across Costa Rica into western Panama. The Talamancas are not the product of violent recent uplift, but of slow tectonic ballet across millions of years. The result is a plateau that, while less craggy than other young mountain chains, contains a raw beauty of its own: misty Paramo grasslands, moss-draped cloud forests, and glacial lakes so still they seem to listen. Chirripó itself, whose name means land of eternal waters in the language of the Cabicar people, rises like a quiet sentinel above this dreamlike world. The climb to the summit is both demanding and meditative, stretching over 20 kilometers of winding ascent through varying ecological zones. Hikers begin their journey in the village of San Gerardo de Rivas, a sleepy settlement nestled among highland farms, coffee plots, and thermal springs. Here, hummingbirds dart among hibiscus blooms, and the morning fog burns away to reveal steep hillsides crisscrossed by footpaths used by farmers and naturalists alike. The trailhead, shrouded in the early hush of pre-dawn, marks the beginning of a transition, not just upward, but inward. The lower trail is a passage through dense tropical rainforest. Giant tree ferns arch overhead, bromeliads and orchids cling to every branch, and the air hangs heavy with moisture and the scent of loam. Spider monkeys swing unseen through the canopy, and the calls of toucans echo like laughter across the treetops. This is not a sterile alpine ascent. It is a journey through a breathing, verdant cathedral. The rhythm of footsteps, the trickling of mountain streams, and the sudden explosion of bird calls create a kind of natural symphony, one that grows softer and more sparse as altitude increases. Midway up the mountain, the forest begins to thin. The transition zone here is rich in biodiversity, harboring species found nowhere else on Earth. This is the realm of the elusive resplendent quetzal, with its iridescent green plumage and long, trailing tail feathers. Spotting one in the wild is like witnessing a piece of living mythology. The mountain also hosts pumas, coyotes, tapirs, and a variety of high-altitude reptiles and amphibians, many of them rare and threatened. Scientists come to Chirripó not only for its vistas, but to study its role as a refuge for species isolated by climate and geography. At higher elevations, the landscape shifts into Paramo, a type of alpine tundra unique to the neotropics. Here, the trees vanish almost entirely, replaced by shrubby plants, cushion mosses, and grasses adapted to withstand nightly freezes and daily sunbursts. The air grows thin and cold. The wind moves with clarity, and the land opens into a surreal mosaic of glacial cirques, ridges, and hidden valleys that seem carved not by time, but by dreams. The trail passes by the eerie, tranquil beauty of the crest ones, massive rock formations that jut skyward like weather-worn monuments, guardians of the upper world. At last, after hours of steady ascent and perhaps an overnight rest at Crest One's base camp, hikers arrive at the summit. The moment is often marked by silence, not because it is empty, but because words fail. The view is unlike any other in the region. To one side, the Pacific stretches endlessly, a blue plate touched with light. To the other, far beyond the swaths of forest and misty ranges, lies the glimmer of the Caribbean. Clouds drift between the two like slow ships, and the wind at the summit is sharp, cleansing, and alive. The dual ocean view is more than a spectacle. It is a revelation of scale. Nowhere else in Central America does one feel so clearly the narrowness of the isthmus, the closeness of two great oceans, the improbability of such grandeur in such a small place. From the top of Chirripó, it becomes apparent that Costa Rica, tiny in territory, holds vastness in spirit. You can trace the ridges of the continental divide like a spine, see the birthplaces of rivers that flow to different worlds, and feel the old, volcanic heartbeat of the land pulsing beneath your feet. And yet, for all its altitude and reach, Mount Chirripó is not a hostile peak. It does not seek to dominate. It does not bristle with jagged rock or bare its teeth with avalanches. Instead, it embraces. It offers itself. It invites reflection. In that way, It mirrors Costa Rica itself, a land where nature is not conquered but protected, where biodiversity is celebrated, and where peace, rather than struggle, has become a national ethos. Indigenous traditions still echo in the mountain's folds. The Cabicar and Bribri peoples, among the oldest continuous cultures in Costa Rica, view the mountain as sacred. According to their cosmologies, Chirripó is part of the origin of the world, a place where spirits dwell and where humans are reminded of their role as stewards, not owners. Offerings are sometimes still made in secret places. Old stories are passed down about rivers that were once sky paths, about stones that remember. Today, Chirripó is protected within a national park that bears its name. Permits are required for access, and efforts are made to limit the environmental impact of visitors. Rangers and conservationists work to maintain the delicate balance between exploration and preservation, between the mountain's quiet and the world's noise. Trails are maintained not just as physical paths, but as agreements between people and place, past and future. When night falls on the summit, the temperature plummets, and the sky unfolds in unimaginable detail. Without the interference of city lights, the stars blaze in numbers rarely seen. Constellations seem to lean in close, and the Milky Way arches overhead like a whisper of infinite stories. In the hush of that darkness, lit only by the starlight and perhaps the soft flicker of a headlamp, it becomes clear that Mount Chirripó is not just a destination. It is a moment suspended in time. What makes Chirripó unreal is not merely its ability to show two oceans at once. It's the way it compresses the world into a single, breathing organism. A living library of life. A sacred path where rainforest becomes tundra, where myth becomes trail, where each breath at the summit feels like an echo of something much older than the self. In its slopes are birdsong and frost, in its valleys are silence and memory. It stands not as a pinnacle, but as a bridge, between sky and earth, ocean and jungle, dream and reality. This video is for educational or entertainment purposes only, and information provided in the video may be incorrect. If you enjoyed the video, consider subscribing to the channel and like the video.